The Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Farrar Fenton. Genesis, chapters 1 through 7. Chapter 1. By periods, God created that which produced the solar systems, then that which produced the earth. But the earth was unorganized and empty, and darkness covered its convulsed surface, while the breath of God rocked the surface of its waters. God then said, "Let there be light!" And light came. And God gazed upon that beautiful light, and God divided the light from the darkness. And to the light God gave the name of day, and to the darkness He gave the name of night. This was the close and the dawn of the first age. God also said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters, and let it be a division between the waters and the waters." And God made the expanse, and it divided the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And that was done. And God named the expanse the heavens. This was the close and the dawn of the second age. God then commanded, "Let the waters below the heavens be collected in one place, and let dry land appear." And that was done. And God named the dry land earth, and the accumulated waters He named seas. And God admired their beauty. God then said, "Let the earth produce seed-bearing vegetation, as well as fruit trees according to their several species, capable of reproduction upon the earth." And that was done. The earth produced the seed-bearing herbage according to every species, as well as the different species of reproductive fruit trees. And God saw that they were good. This was the close and the dawn of the third age. God further said, "Let reflectors appear in the expanse of the heavens, for a division between the day and the night, and let them serve to mark seasons, periods, and years, and let them also illuminate the expanse of the skies, so as to reflect their light upon the earth." And that was done. God had made two large luminaries, the larger one to control the day, and the smaller one to control the night, accompanied by the stars. And God had fixed them in the heavenly expanse, so as to illuminate the earth, to control the day and to control the night, and to mark the division between the light and the darkness. And God saw they were beautiful. This was the close and the dawn of the fourth age. God then said, "Let the waters be swarming with animal life, and let birds fly in the expanse of the skies above the earth." God accordingly produced the monsters of the deep, and the waters swarmed with every species of reptile, and also produced every species of flying bird. And God admired their beauty. And God, in giving them His blessing, said, "Be fruitful and multiply, so as to fill the waters of the deep, and also let the birds multiply upon the earth." This was the close and the dawn of the fifth age. God then said, "Let the earth produce animal life according to its species, in quadrupeds, reptiles, and all wild animals answering to their species." And that was done. God accordingly made the various species of the animals of the earth, as well as the several species of quadrupeds, and all the different species of reptiles, and God admired their beauty. God then said, "Let us make men under our shadow, as our representatives, and subject to them the fish of the waters, and the birds of the sky, and the quadrupeds, as well as the whole of the earth, and every reptile that creeps upon it." So God created men under His own shadow, creating them in the shadow of God, and constituting them male and female. God then gave them His blessing. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply so as to fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the skies, and over every living animal that moves upon the earth." God also said, "See, I have given you for food every fruit and grain-bearing plant upon the surface of the whole earth, as well as fruit and seed-bearing trees and all vegetation, so that they may be food for you, and for every animal of the earth, and for every bird of the skies, and for every reptile upon the earth which possesses the life of animals." And it was done. And God gazed upon all that he had made, and it was very beautiful. Thus the close came, and the dawn came of the sixth age. Chapter 2. Thus the whole host of the heavens as well as the earth were completed. And God rested at the seventh age from all the works which he had made. Therefore God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because he then rested from all the work which God had arranged to do. These were the productions for the heavens and the earth during their creation at the period of their organization by the Lord God of both the earth and heavens. And of every plant of the field before it was upon the earth, and every herb of the field before he caused it to grow, even before the ever-living God had scattered them upon the earth, and man existed not to cultivate the earth. A vapor then rose up from the earth, and saturated the whole surface of the ground. The ever-living God afterwards formed man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the life of animals. But man became a life-containing soul. The ever-living God then planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the ever-living God caused to grow all the trees that were beautiful and good for food, as well as the tree of lives in the center of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A lake also sprang up in Eden to supply the garden with water, and from there it divided and became 4 sources. The name of the first is Pishon, and flows along the land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is pure. There are also bdellium and the onyx. And the second river is Gihon. It flows along all the land of Cush. The name of the third river is Hiddekel, which flows through the east of Ashur. And the fourth river is the Phrath. The ever-living God then took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden for the purpose of cultivating and taking care of it. And the Lord God instructed the man, saying, For food you may eat of the whole of the trees of the garden, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, because in the day you eat from it, dying you shall die. The ever-living God also said, It is not good for the man to be in solitude. I will make a comforter to live with him. Therefore the ever-living God, who had formed out of the ground every animal of the field, as well as every bird of the skies, took them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man with the living soul named them, that was their name. So the man gave names to all the quadrupeds, and all the birds of the skies, and to all the wild animals. But it was no comfort for the man to be with them. So the ever-living God threw the man into a stupor, and he slept. And taking one of his ribs, he closed up the flesh in its place. And from the rib which the ever-living God had taken out of the man, he constructed a woman, and brought her to the man. And the man said, This form is bone of my own bone, and flesh of my own flesh. This shall be named woman, because she was taken from man. Man shall therefore leave his father and his mother, and shall unite with his wife, and they shall be one body. And they were naked, the man and his wife, but they were not ashamed. Chapter 3. Now the serpent was more impudent than any of the wild animals of the field which the ever-living God had made. So he asked the woman, Is it true that God has said you may not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman replied to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, Do not eat of it, and do not even touch it, lest you die. But the serpent answered the woman, You will not die. But God knows that at the time you eat of it, your eyes will then be opened, and you will be like God, acquainted with both good and evil. So the woman, perceiving that the tree was good for food, and beautiful to the eyes, and a tree stimulating to the intellect, she took some of its fruit and ate it, and gave some to her husband with her, and he also ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they became aware that they were naked. They accordingly joined fig leaves together, and made aprons for themselves. They then heard the sound of the ever-living God moving in the garden in the breeze of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the ever-living God called to the man, saying, "Where are you?" And he replied, "I heard your sound in the garden, and perceiving that I was naked, I hid myself." Then he asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded that you should not eat?" And the man replied, The woman whom you gave to me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate it." "Why did you do that?" the Lord God asked the woman. And the woman answered, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate it." The ever-living God accordingly said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you shall be accursed more than all the cattle, and more than all the wild beasts of the field. You shall crawl upon your belly, and eat dust all the days of your life. I will also cause antagonism between you and the woman, and between your progeny and her progeny. He shall wound your head, and you shall wound his heel." But to the woman he said, "I will increase your sorrows and your joys. You shall give birth to children with pain, but your love shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Then to Adam he said, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, 'Eat not of it,' I will set the ground apart for your cultivation. In sorrow you shall eat from it every day of your life. It shall grow thorns and briars for you, but you shall have the plants of the field for food. In the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread, until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For dust you are, and to the dust you shall return." The man then gave to his wife the name of Eve, because she was the mother of all life. For Adam also and his wife the ever-living God made clothing of skins, and dressed them. The Lord God also said, "Now the man was like one of ourselves, acquainted with both good and evil. Therefore it may be that he will stretch out his hand, and take also of the tree of lives, and eat of it, and live forever." The ever-living God consequently expelled him from the Garden of Eden, in order to cultivate the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he stationed at the east of the Garden of Eden the divine watchers, with the flaming sword to guard the path to the tree of lives. Chapter 4. The man afterwards knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain, and said, "I have been given a man from the ever-living." She afterwards gave birth to his brother Abel. And Abel became a shepherd of sheep, but Cain was a cultivator of the soil. And during the harvest time Cain brought some of the produce of the ground, as an offering to the ever-living. And Abel also brought of the best and the fattest of his sheep. And the Lord looked favorably upon Abel and his offering, but he did not regard Cain and his offering with favor. Cain therefore was very angry, and his countenance fell. Then the ever-living asked Cain, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do right, is there not approval? And if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door and awaits you, but you should conquer it." When Cain was afterwards talking with his brother Abel, and they were together in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and murdered him. The Lord accordingly asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" But he replied, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" The ever-living, however, answered, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. Therefore you are cursed from the ground, which has opened her mouth to take in your brother's blood from your hand. When you cultivate the ground, it shall not yield up its wealth to you. You shall be a wanderer and a vagabond upon the earth." But Cain answered to the Lord, "My punishment is heavier than I can bear. Since you drive me today out from off the face of this land, I shall be deprived of your presence, and be a wanderer and a vagabond upon the earth, and whoever meets me will kill me." But the ever-living replied, "Not so. Whoever kills Cain shall be punished sevenfold." Therefore the Lord put a mark upon Cain, so that he might not be attacked by any one who met him. Cain accordingly went out from the presence of the ever-living, and lived in a land of exile on the eastern side of Eden, where Cain knew his wife. And she conceived, and gave birth to Enoch, and he built a village, and named it after the name of his son, Hanok. And to Hanok there was born Irad. And Irad produced Mehujael, and Mehujael produced Methusael, and Methusael produced Lamech. And Lamech took 2 wives for himself. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. And Adah gave birth to Jabal, who was the originator of tent dwellers with cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the originator of all those who play the harp and wind instruments. Zillah also gave birth to Tubal-Cain, the improver of every work in copper and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech, addressing his wives, said, Adah and Zillah, listen to my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. For I killed a man who wounded, and a youth who hurt me. If Cain had 7-fold protection, 77 should be that of Lamech. And Adam knew his wife again. She gave birth to a son, and named him Sheth. For God, she said, has given me another son in the place of Abel, who was murdered by Cain. And to Sheth a son was born, and he gave him the name of Enosh. Men then began to call upon the name of the ever-living. Chapter 5. This is the birth book of men. From the time that God created men, making them to represent God, constituting them male and female, giving them his blessing, and naming them by the name of mankind upon the day of their creation. Adam, when he was 130 years old, produced a representative of himself, like his own shadow, and gave him the name of Sheth. And the lifetime of Adam, after the birth of Sheth, was 800 years, during which time sons and daughters were born to him. So the whole lifetime of Adam was 930 years when he died. And Sheth was 105 years old when Enosh was born to him. And Sheth, after the birth of Enosh, lived 807 years, and had sons and daughters born to him. And the whole lifetime of Sheth was 912 years, when he died. And Enosh lived 90 years when Canaan was born to him. And Enosh, after the birth of Canaan, lived 850 years, and had sons and daughters born to him. And all the lifetime of Enosh was 905 years, and he then died. And Canaan lived 70 years when Mahalalel was born to him. And Canaan, after Mahalalel was born to him, lived 830 years, and had sons and daughters born to him. So the whole lifetime of Canaan was 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel, living until he was 65 years of age, had Jared born to him. And Mahalalel, after the birth of Jared, lived 830 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And the whole lifetime of Mahalalel was 895 years, when he died. And Jared lived until he was 162 years of age, when Hanok was born to him. And after the birth of Hanok, Jared lived 800 years, and had sons and daughters born to him. And the whole lifetime of Jared was 962 years, and he died. And Hanok lived until the age of 65 years, when Methuselah was born to him. And Hanok walked with God after Methuselah had been born to him 300 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And the whole lifetime of Hanok was 365 years. And Hanok walked with God, and he did not die, God having taken him to himself. And Methuselah, having lived until he was 187 years of age, had Lamech born to him. And Methuselah, after Lamech had been born to him, lived 782 years, having had sons and daughters born to him. And the whole lifetime of Methuselah was 969 years, and he then died. And Lamech lived until he was 182 years of age, when a son was born to him, to whom he gave the name of Noah, saying, He comforts in our labor, and in the trouble of our hands, upon the land which was denounced by the ever-living. And Lamech, after Noah was born to him, lived until the age of 595 years, sons and daughters being born to him. And the whole lifetime of Lamech was 777 years when he died. And Noah was 500 years old when Shem, Ham and Japheth, were born to him. Chapter 6. But when corrupt men increased upon the surface of the earth, and sons and daughters were born to them, then the sons of God admired the daughters of men who were beautiful, and they took to themselves wives from all they desired. Consequently the ever-living said, My spirit shall not call to man forever, for he is sinful flesh, but they shall have 120 years. The Nephilim were upon the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore to them mighty men, who were men of renown of old. And the ever-living saw that the sin of man increased upon the earth, and that every effort of the thought of his heart was to promote sin every day. And the ever-living sighed for the doings of man upon earth, and it grieved his heart. The Lord therefore said, I will sweep away man whom I created from off the surface of the earth, from man to beast and reptile and birds of the skies, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor in the presence of the ever-living. The following are the genealogies from Noah. Noah was a good man. He was upright in his age. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons given to him, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But the earth corrupted itself in the presence of God, and the earth was full of crime. And God looked upon the earth and saw its corruption, for all men had corrupted their way upon the earth. So God said to Noah, I decide to cut off all men from my sight, for the earth is full of crime from their presence. I will accordingly sweep them from the earth. Make therefore for yourself an ark of pitch pine. Make the ark with decks, and pitch it inside and outside with pitch. You shall make it thus. It shall be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits deep. Make a ventilating fan, fixed in a turret of a cubit, high above the upper deck, and connected with that, make an opening in the sides of the ark, on the 2nd and 3rd lower decks. You shall make 2nd and 3rd decks. For I myself will bring a downrush of waters upon the earth, to sweep off all beings possessing the breath of life from under heaven, all that move upon the land. Then I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark yourself with your sons and your wife, and your sons' wives along with you. And from every animal of all kinds, 2 of each shall go into the ark to live with you. They shall be male and female, of birds by their species, and of animals by their species, and of reptiles moving in the field by their species. 2 of each shall accompany you, so as to preserve life. And you shall take with you all kinds of food which is eaten, and store it with you, and it shall be provision for yourself and for them. Noah accordingly did all that God commanded him. He accomplished it. Chapter 7. Afterwards the Lord said to Noah, Go yourself and all your household into the ark, for I have seen that you have been righteous in the face of this generation. Take with you of all clean cattle 7, male and female, and of beasts which are unclean 2 of them, a male and a female. Also from birds of the sky 7 male and female, so as to preserve a seed of life upon the surface of the land. Because at the end of 7 days I will pour onto the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will sweep away every creature that I made from off the surface of the ground. And Noah did all that the ever-living instructed him. Noah was 600 years old when the downrush of water came upon the earth. Noah with his children and wife, and the wives of his sons with them, went accordingly into the ark from the face of the waters of the deluge, with the clean cattle and with the unclean cattle, and with the birds and all that crawls upon the field, who came 2 by 2 to the ark, male and female, as God had directed Noah. When the 7 days had passed, then the downrush of water came upon the earth. In the 600th year of the life of Noah, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the depths of the great ocean were heaved up, and the belts in the heavens were broken, and there was a downrush onto the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. At the close of that day, Noah, along with Shem, Ham and Japheth, sons of Noah, and the wife of Noah, and the 3 wives of Noah's sons along with them, entered the ark. They themselves, and all the animals according to their species, and all the cattle according to their species, and all crawlers upon the earth by their species, and all birds by their species, every bird of every wing. There also came to Noah into the ark, 2 by 2, from all creatures which have animal breath. Thus they came male and female of all creatures, as God had directed them, and the Lord shut him inside. The downrush continued 40 days upon the earth, and the waters swelled and lifted up the ark and raised it from off the land. And the waters overwhelmed and rose greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated upon the surface of the waters. The waters overwhelmed the land, and covered all the hills and mountains which are below the skies. The waters covered the hills 15 cubits. And all animals that moved upon the land expired, with bird and cattle and wild animals, and every insect swarming upon the land, and every man. All which breathed the breath of animals in its nostrils, with all that was in the desert, died. Thus he swept away the whole that he had made upon the surface of the ground, from man to cattle, and reptile, and birds of the skies. Thus he swept them from off the earth. But Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained, and the waters overwhelmed the earth 150 days. The end of chapters 1 through 7 of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. Genesis chapters 8 through 14. Chapter 8. But God remembered Noah, and all the animals, and all the cattle which were with him in the ark. Therefore God passed a wind over the earth, and the waters dried, and he restrained the outpourings from the deep, and the belts of the skies, and stopped the torrents from the skies, and stayed the waters from going on to the earth. And so the waters retired and diminished from the period of 150 days. The ark then rested on the 17th day of the 7th month upon the peaks of the high hills, and the waters were retreating and subsiding until the 10th month. In the 11th month the tops of the hills appeared. Then at the end of 40 days Noah opened the window which he had made in the ark, and sent out a raven, and it went, wandered, and turned about until the waters dried away from off the earth. Afterwards he sent out a dove from him, to see if the waters had lessened from the surface of the field. But the dove found not a resting place for the sole of her foot. So she returned to him in the ark, for the waters were still on the whole surface of the earth. So he put out his hand and took her, and brought her to him into the ark. He then waited 7 days longer, and again sent out the dove from the ark. And the dove, returning at dusk, carried in her mouth an olive leaf which had been broken off. So Noah then knew that the waters were off the earth. Waiting yet another 7 days, he sent the dove out again, and it did not again return to him. At the end of his 601st year, on the 1st day of the month, the waters dried from off the earth. Noah then loosened the hatches of the ark, and looking out, perceived that the surface of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. God then spoke to Noah, saying, Go from the ark, yourself, your wife, and your sons wives along with you, all the animals which are with you, of every kind, with bird and cattle, and with every reptile that creeps upon the earth. Bring it along with you, and let them breed plentifully on the land, and cover it, and increase over the earth. So Noah went out, and his wife and his sons' wives with him, every animal, every bird, and every reptile creeping upon the land, according to their species, went out from the ark. Noah then built an altar to the ever-living, and took from every clean beast and from every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings upon the altar. And the ever-living perceived pleasant sweet perfume, and the Lord said in his heart, Never again will I curse the ground to the labor of man, although the thought of the heart of man is wickedness from his youth. And never again will I cut off every animal I have made. During the whole existence of the earth, sowing and harvest, and cold and heat, and winter and summer, spring and autumn, and day and night, shall continue. Chapter 9. God also blessed Noah and his sons, and said, "Be prolific and increase, and fill the earth. And the fear and terror of you shall be upon every animal of the land, and every bird of the sky, with all that swarm upon the ground, and all the fish of the waters. They shall be given into your hand. Every living animal that moves shall be food for you. I have given the whole to you like the green herbage. But the flesh with its life, its blood, you shall not eat. And also the blood of your life I will require. From the hand of every animal I will require it. And from the hand of man, even from the hand of his brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his own blood shall be shed. Because I made man under the shadow of God. And be prolific yourselves, increase and swarm on the earth, and multiply on it." God also spoke to Noah and to his sons along with him, saying, "Now I myself will fix a covenant with you, and your descendants after you, and with every living animal that is with you, with bird and cattle, and with every animal of the earth with you, of all coming out of the ark, and with every wild beast of the earth. I have fixed my covenant with you, that all flesh shall never again be destroyed by a downrush of water, and there shall never again be a downrush to desolate the earth." God also said, "This is the attestation of the covenant which I have made between myself and you, and between all animal life which is with you for every generation. I place my rainbow in the clouds, and it shall be for an evidence of the covenant between myself and all the earth. When there is my cloud covering the earth, and the rainbow appears in the cloud, I shall remember my covenant that is between myself and you, and between all animal life, and there shall never again be a downrush of water to sweep away all living. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and appear as an eternal record of the covenant between God and all animal life existing upon the earth." And God repeated to Noah, "This is the covenant which I have settled between myself and all existence which is upon earth." Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these three the whole earth was peopled. Noah then became a farmer, and planted a vineyard, and drinking of the wine, he became drunk and was naked in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and reported it to his two brothers outside. Shem and Japheth, however, took a shawl, and spread it on their shoulders, and, going backwards, they covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's shame. So when Noah woke up from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan! A servant of servants let him be to his brothers." He also exclaimed, "The living God bless Shem, and let Canaan be a servant to him. God will extend Japheth, but he will dwell in the tent of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant." Noah lived after the deluge for 350 years. So all the lifetime of Noah was 950 years when he died. Chapter 10. Now these are the registers of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, for they had sons born to them after the deluge. The sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, and Madai, and Eon, and Thubal, and Meshech, and Thyras. And the sons of Gomer: Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Thogarmah. And the sons of Javan: Eon, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and the Dodanim. From these they spread themselves over the sea coasts of the countries of the nations, each with their language amongst the Gentile tribes. And the sons of Ham: Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush: Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Raamah, and Sabtika. And the sons of Raamah: Sheba, and Dedan. To Cush was born Nimrod. Wild beasts began then to infest the earth, so he became a powerful hunter in the presence of the Lord. Therefore it is said, "Like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord." And the capitals of his kingdoms were Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calinah in the bushland. From that land Ashur proceeded to Assyria, and built Nineveh, and the town of the plains, and Calah, and Resen, between Nineveh and Calah, which is a large city. The Misraim also produced the Lodim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Naphtuhim, and Pathrusim, and Casluhim, from whom sprung the Philistines, and the Caphtorites. And to Canaan were born Zidon, his eldest, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. And each spread themselves as the tribes of the Canaanites. And the boundaries of the Canaanites are from Zidon by the valley of Gerar to Gaza, along the valley of Sodom, and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, to Lashar. These were the sons of Ham, in their tribes and languages, in the regions of the heathen. And Shem, the elder brother of Japheth, also produced. He was the father of all the sons of Heber. The sons of Shem were Elam, and Ashur, and Arphaxad, and Lot, and Aram. And the sons of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash. And to Arphaxad was born Shelah, and to Shelah was born Heber. And to Heber were born two sons. The name of the first Peleg, because in his days the continent was split up. And his brother's name was Joktan. And to Joktan were born Almadad, and Sheleph, and Hazarmaveth, and Jerah, and Hadoram, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Obal, and Abimael, and Sheba, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Jobab. All these were sons of Joktan, and they populated from Mesha, by the valley of Sephar, a mountain of the east. These are the sons of Shem, by their tribes and by their languages, in their countries among the heathen. The above were the families of the sons of Noah, and their descendants by tribes. From them they spread themselves amongst the nations on the earth after the flood. Chapter 11. All the country was agreed for settled objects. But some of them marching from the east arrived at a plain in the bushland and halted there. Then each said to his neighbor, "Come, let us set to work making bricks, and see that they are properly burnt, and bricks shall serve us for stone, and petroleum for mortar." So they agreed. "We will build here for ourselves a city and a tower, whose top shall reach the sky. Thus we will make a beacon for ourselves, so that we may not be scattered over all the surface of the country." But a chief came down to inspect the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the chief said, "You see all these people are united in the same purpose, and having begun to do this, they will not be restrained from anything they determine upon. I will go down and frustrate their designs, so that one will not listen to another's proposals." So the chief scattered them over the surface of the whole country, and they abandoned the building of the city. They therefore called its name Babel, because it was there that the chief confused the designs of all the country. Thus from there the Lord scattered them over all the surface of the land. These are the genealogies of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when Arphaxad was born to him 2 years after the deluge. Shem then lived after the birth of Arphaxad 500 years, and had sons and daughters born to him. And Arphaxad lived 35 years, then had Shelah born to him. And Arphaxad lived after the birth of Shelah 443 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Shelah lived 30 years when Eber was born to him. And after the birth of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Eber lived 34 years, when Peleg was born to him. Eber lived after the birth of Peleg 430 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Peleg lived 30 years, and Reu was born to him. Peleg lived after the birth of Reu 209 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Reu lived 32 years, when Serug was born to him. And after the birth of Serug, Reu lived 207 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Serug lived 30 years, and Nachor was born to him. Serug lived after the birth of Nachor 200 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Nachor lived 29 years, when Terah was born to him. And Nachor lived after the birth of Terah 119 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Terah lived 70 years, when Abram, Nahor, and Haran were born to him. Now these are the descendants of Terah. Terah had Abram, Nahor, and Haran born to him, and Haran had Lot born to him. Haran died before Terah his father in his native country, in Ur of the Chaldees. Abram and Nahor then took wives for themselves. The name of the wife of Abram was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and father of Iscah. Sarai was sterile and had no child for herself. Terah, however, took Abram his son, and Lot his grandson, the son of Haran, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, the wife of Abram his own son, and departed from Ur of the Chaldees to travel to the land of Canaan, and arriving at Haran, they settled there. The lifetime of Terah was 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Chapter 12. The ever-living then said to Abram, "Depart from your native land and from the home of your forefathers to the land to which I will direct you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will prosper and ennoble your name, and you shall be a benefactor. And I will bless those who benefit you, and punish those who injure you, and all the nations of mankind shall become benefited from you." So Abram departed as the ever-living had told him, and Lot accompanied him. And Abram was 75 years old at his departure from Haran. Abram also took Sarai his wife, and Lot the son of his brother, and the whole of his property which he possessed, and the slaves which he had acquired in Haran. And he proceeded to travel to the land of Canaan, and he came to the country of Canaan. Then Abram traveled in that country to the village of Shechem, as far as Alon Moreh, and the Canaanites were still in the land. The ever-living also appeared to Abram, and repeated, "I will give this country to your descendants." So he there built an altar to the ever-living who had appeared to him. Afterwards he removed from there to the hills at the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel at the west, and Hai to the east. There he also built an altar to the ever-living, and called upon the name of the ever-living. Then Abram marched on his journey, and proceeded to the south. But a famine occurred in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to stay there for a time, as the famine was severe in the land. And as they were approaching Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, "See now, I know you are a fair woman, and it may be that when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they may murder me and keep you alive. Say therefore that you are my sister, so that they may show respect to me because of you, and my life may be saved by means of you." And on Abram entering Egypt, the Egyptians noticed that the woman was very fair. The courtiers of the Pharaoh also observed her and sung her praises to Pharaoh. The woman was accordingly taken to Pharaoh's palace. On her account he favored Abram, and presented him with sheep, oxen, asses, slaves, and maids, as well as she-asses and camels. But the ever-living disturbed Pharaoh and his household greatly on account of Sarai, the wife of Abram. So Pharaoh summoned Abram and asked, "Why have you done this to me? Why did you not inform me that she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister'? For I might have secured her as a wife for myself. But now take your wife and go." And Pharaoh ordered his men about him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had along with him. Chapter 13. So Abram went up from Egypt with his wife and all he possessed, and Lot accompanied him to the southern pastures. And Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. Afterwards he marched from the south towards Beth-el, to the place where his tent had at first been pitched, between Beth-el and Hai, to the place where he had formerly built an altar, and there Abram called upon the name of the ever-living. Lot also, who journeyed with Abram, possessed sheep, cattle, and camp followers, so that the land could not support them living together, for their flocks were so great that they could not live together. A dispute accordingly took place between Abram's shepherds and Lot's shepherds, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite, who inhabited the land. So Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no quarrel between me and you, or between my shepherds and your shepherds, for we are both of us brothers. Is not all the country before you? I ask you to separate yourself from me. If you take to the left, then I will take to the right. If to the right, I will go to the left." Lot therefore looked up, and observed all the district of the Jordan, that it was everywhere well watered. Before the Lord swept away Sodom and Gomorrah, it was like a garden of the Lord from the land of Egypt to the valley of Zoar. So the whole plain of the Jordan pleased him, and Lot marched to the east, and they separated from each other. Abram accordingly remained in the land of Canaan, and Lot remained in the villages of the plain, but resided at Sodom. The men of Sodom, however, were very wicked and sinful in the presence of the Ever-living. The Ever-living said to Abram, after Lot separated from him, "Look upward, and from the place where you are, take a view northward and southward, and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give to you and to your race forever. I will also make your race like the dust of the earth, so that if a man is able to count the dust of the earth, then he can number your race. Arise and march through the land, inspect both its length and its breadth, for I will give it to you." So Abram struck his camp, and came and settled in the oak woods of Mamre, which is near Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Ever-living. Chapter 14. It was now in the reign of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of the Gentiles. And they waged war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shenab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboyim, and king Bela of Zoar. All these were defeated in the valley of Siddim, now known as the Salt Sea. They served Kedorlaomer for 12 years, but in the 13th year they rebelled. Accordingly, in the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and his allied kings defeated the Rephaim at Ashtaroth's Horn, and the Zuzim at Ham along with them, and the Emim at the Devil's Horns, and the Horites in the mountains of Seir, as far as the pastures which adjoin the desert. They then returned and came to the well of justice, and conquered all the plains of Amalekites, and also the Amorites who inhabited the palm groves. The king of Sodom accordingly went out with the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboyim, and king Bela of Zoar. And they commenced hostilities in the valley of Siddim with Kedorlaomer king of Elam, and Tidal king of the Gentiles, and Amraphel king of Shinar, and Arioch king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. The valley of Siddim, however, was full of petroleum pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah took flight and fell there. And the hillmen pursued, and seized all the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the whole of their stores, and marched off. They also took Lot, the nephew of Abram, and his catels, when they marched, for he resided in Sodom. A fugitive then came and reported to Abram the colonist, who had settled at the oak woods of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Ashcol, and brother of Aner, who were confederate chiefs with Abram. When Abram heard that they had taken captive his relative, he then mustered the trained youths of his own family, to the number of 318, and pursued to punish them, and overtook them in the night time. And he and his followers defeated and pursued them to Hobah, which is on the north of Damascus. And he recovered all the property, as well as Lot his relative and his property, together with the men and the people. The king of Sodom then met him to congratulate him after his return from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him at the Devil's Valley. Melchizedek, also king of Salem, came out to them with wine, and he was a priest of Almighty God. And he gave him his blessing, and said, "Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth, bless Abram, and you thank the Most High, who gave your enemies into your hand." He then gave to him 1/10 of all the spoil. The king of Sodom also said to Abram, "You have given me my life, so take all the wealth to yourself." But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to the ever-living God Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, against taking even a shoestring, or from taking anything that is yours, so that you may not say, 'I have made Abram rich,' except what the soldiers have eaten and the share of the men who came with me, Aner, Ashcol, and Mamre. Allow them to take their share." The end of chapters 8 through 14 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Genesis, chapters 15 through 21. Chapter 15. It was after these events that the ever-living spoke to Abram in a vision, saying, "Be not afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your abundant reward. I will greatly enrich you." But Abram replied, "Mighty God, why should you give to me when I go childless? And the possessor of my house will be Eliezer of Damascus." And Abram continued, "Look at me. You have not given me offspring, so that the steward of my house will become my heir." But the ever-living answered him, saying, "That man shall not be your heir, but one who shall owe his birth to yourself shall become your heir." Then he took him to the open, and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them," telling him also, "Thus shall your race be." And Abram believed in the ever-living, and it was repaid to him in righteousness. He also said to him, "I am the ever-living, who brought you from Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land as an inheritance." But he replied, "Mighty Lord, how am I to know that I shall inherit it?" Who answered him, "Select for me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Taking all these, he split them in the middle, and placed each part opposite its neighbor, but he did not split the birds. Then the kites descended upon the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. And when the sun was sinking, a stupor fell upon Abram, and also a great and terrible darkness oppressed him. He then said to Abram, "Know this, and be assured that your race will be foreigners in a land not their own, and they shall enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. The nation which enslaves them, however, I will punish, and after that I will bring them out with great wealth. But you shall go to your forefathers in peace. You shall be buried with beautiful gray hairs. And in several generations they shall return here, when the sins of the Amorites will be complete." After the sunset, followed by thick darkness, a bright cloud appeared, a blazing fire which passed between the pieces. At the same time the ever-living made a covenant with Abram, saying, "I will give this country to your race, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the Kenite, the Kenizzite, the Cadmonite, the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Rephaim, and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Girgashite, and the Jebusite." Chapter 16. Sarai, Abram's wife, had given him no children, but she had an Egyptian maid named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, the ever-living has kept me childless. Therefore go to my maid. Perhaps she will have a son for me." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Therefore Sarai, the wife of Abram, took Hagar the Egyptian maid at the end of the 10th year of Abram's residence in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abram her husband as a wife. So he went to Hagar, and she conceived. When she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despicable in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, "My wrong came from you. I gave my maid to you as wife, and she sees that she has conceived, and I am despicable in her eyes. Let the ever-living decide between me and you." Abram answered Sarai, "Well, your maid is under your hand. Do to her whatever you consider right." So Sarai persecuted her, and she fled from her presence. A messenger of the ever-living met her, however, at the well of waters in the desert, at the well by the road to the wall, and asked, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where are you going, and what are you weeping for?" And she answered, "I am fleeing from the hand of Sarai, my mistress." But the messenger of the ever-living said, "Return to your mistress, and submit yourself to her." The ever-living's messenger further said to her, "I will greatly increase your race, so that they cannot be numbered for multitude." The ever-living's messenger also continued, "You are now with child, and you will give birth to a son, and you must call his name Ishmael, for God heard your sorrow. And he shall be a free man, his hand shall be with every man, and the hand of every man with him, and he shall stand up in the presence of all his brothers." She accordingly called the name of the ever-living who spoke to her. "You are the God I saw. I can say this, for I have lived after he appeared to me." So the well was named the Well of the Vision of Life. It is situated between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar gave birth to a son to Abram, and Abram called the name of his son by her Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar gave birth to Ishmael to Abram. Chapter 17. When Abram was 96 years old, the ever-living revealed again to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be perfect. And I will make a covenant between myself and you, and I will increase you very, very greatly. Abram then fell on his face, and God spoke to him, saying, I now make a covenant with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. So your name shall be Abraham. For you shall be the father of many nations. And I will make you very fruitful, and I will make nations and kingdoms proceed from you. I will also establish my covenant between myself and you, and with your descendants after you from generation to generation forever, to be a God to you and your race after you. I will also give to you and your race this country where you are a foreigner, the whole land of Canaan for a possession forever, and I will be their God. God also repeated to Abraham, Now this is the covenant which you shall keep, as well as your race after you in their generations. This is the covenant which you shall keep between myself and you and your race after you. Circumcise every male of them, and they shall be circumcised in the foreskin of the body, for an attestation of the covenant between myself and them. And upon the 8th day every male shall be circumcised in their generations, whether born of the family or purchased for money, although he is not of your race. Whoever is the child of your own family, or bought for money, shall be circumcised. And it is my covenant in your body as an everlasting bond. But the degraded male who has not been circumcised shall then become separated from my people, because he has broken the covenant. God further said to Abraham, Sarai your wife shall no more be called by the name of Sarai, for Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and also give you a son from her, and she shall become the mother of nations, and of kings of peoples. Then Abraham fell upon his face, and laughed, and said in his heart, When I am 100 years old? And will Sarah also, when 90 years of age, have children? Then Abraham said to God, I wish that Ishmael might live in your favor. And God replied, Feeble Sarah, your wife, shall give you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I will fix my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his race after him. And for Ishmael I have also heard you. My blessing will be with him, and I will cause him to prosper and extend him very greatly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will grant him to become a great nation. But that other is the covenant I will fix with Isaac, whom Sarah your wife will bear about this time next year. Then he ceased to converse with him, and the divine messenger went up from Abraham. Abraham accordingly took his son Ishmael, and all who were born in his family, and all bought with his money, every male of the people of the household of Abraham, and circumcised the foreskin of their bodies on that very day which God spoke to him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the foreskin of the body. Ishmael also was 13 years of age when he was circumcised in the foreskin of his body. On the very same day Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised. All the men born in his house, or bought with his money, and foreigners, were circumcised with him. Chapter 18. The Lord again revealed to him at the oak woods of Mamre, when he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. Then he raised his eyes and looked, and saw 3 men standing opposite to him. And he looked, and called to them from the door of his tent, and bowing to the ground, said, My masters, if now I have found favor in your eyes, will you not come in to your servant? Take a little water and wash your feet, and rest under the wood, and take a bit of bread and refresh your heart, and afterwards proceed. Perhaps for this you passed near your servant? And they replied, Do as you have said. Abraham then hastened into his tent to Sarah, and said,
Hasten with 3 measures of fine flour, kneaded, and make cakes."
Abraham also ran to the fold, and took a fine fat calf, and gave it to a youth, who at once dressed it. Then he took cheese and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and placed before them. And he stood opposite them under the trees while they were eating. They afterwards asked him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" And he replied,
"She is in the tent."
They then said, "I will restore you as at the period of youth, and there shall come a son from Sarah your wife." And Sarah heard it at the door of the tent where she was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years, and feeble. It was not with Sarah as women are. So Sarah laughed in her apartment, saying,
"After I am wasted, will there be pleasure for me, even when my master is old?"
The Lord consequently said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I suckle a child when I am old?' Is it a great thing for the ever-living to say, 'At such a time I will return to you the period of youth, and give a son to Sarah'?" But Sarah denied, replying,
"I did not laugh,"
for she was afraid. He, however, answered, "Yes, you did laugh." The men then departed from there, and faced towards Sodom, and Abraham walked with them to converse. Then the Lord said, "Shall I conceal from Abraham what I am about to do? When Abraham is to become a great and mighty nation, and every nation of the earth to be blessed through him? For I have instructed him in order that he may command his sons, and the sons of his house after him, that they must keep to the path of the ever-living, and do right and justice, so that the ever-living may cause to come upon Abraham what he has promised to him." So the Lord continued, "Sodom and Gomorrah shriek, for their sins are many, and are very grievous. I have therefore come down, and I will see what causes the shrieks that have come to me. Have they full cause? If not, I will know." So the men turned from there, and went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood firm in the presence of the Lord. And Abraham approached and said,
"Will you destroy the just along with the wicked? If there are 50 just persons within the city, will you destroy it, and not raise your hand from the place because of the 50 just persons that are within it? Far be it from you to do as you have said, thus to kill the just with the wicked, and to make the just and the wicked alike. It is far from you. Will not the judge of the whole earth do justice?"
The Lord accordingly answered, "If I find 50 just men in the whole city of Sodom, then I will for their sakes take off my hand from all the place." Then Abraham answered and said, "See now, I began to speak to my Lord, although I am but dust and ashes. If there should want 5 just persons of the 50, will you sweep away the whole city for want of 5? And he answered, "I will not sweep it away if I find there 45. But he continued still to speak to him, and said,
"If there are found 40 there?"
He replied, "I will not do it for the sake of the 40.
"Still," he said, "let not my lord be angry now, and I will speak. If 30 are found there?"
And he answered, "I will not do it if I find 30. He continued, however,
"See now, I will dare to speak to my lord. If there are found 20 there?"
And he answered, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. He then said,
"Let not my lord be angry now, and I will speak once more. If 10 are found there?"
And he replied, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. Then the Lord went to do what he had told to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his own place. Chapter 19. And 2 of the messengers came to Sodom at evening, when Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw and rose to invite them, and bowed his face to the ground, and said, "See now, my good sirs, turn aside to the house of your servant, and rest yourselves, and wash your feet, and quench your thirst, and you can then proceed on your journey." But they replied, "No, for we must go further." Then he pressed them much, so they turned with him and came to his house. And he made them a repast with unleavened cakes, and they partook of them.
It was not yet time for sleep, when the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, from youths to old men, in fact all the people of the neighborhood, and called out to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may ravish them." Lot, however, went out to them to the porch, and the doors were closed behind him. And he said, "My friends, do not commit such wickedness. Look now, I have 2 virgin daughters. I will bring them to you, and you can do to them whatever you like. Only to these men do not such a thing, for as a protection from it, they came to the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Be off with that! This fellow came here a foreigner, and he dictates decisions. Now it shall be worse for you than for them." Then they rushed to the man Lot with a vengeance, and attempted to break the gates. But the men put out their hands, and brought Lot to themselves into the house, and closed the gates. And they struck the men in front of the house with blindness, from the youngest to the oldest, so that they could not find the doorway. Then the men said to Lot, "Now, who is with you here, relative, or son or daughter, or any one that you have in this city? Let them go out from this place, for we shall destroy this place. For its great shriek has come before the ever-living, and the ever-living has sent us to destroy it." Lot therefore went out and spoke to his relatives, to the husbands of his daughters, and said, "Come, let us go out from this place, for the ever-living will destroy the city." But he was considered a fool in the eyes of his relatives. So when dawn arrived, the messengers said to Lot, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters, and go out, for the crimes of this city are completed." But he hesitated. So the men seized hold of his hand, and the hand of his wife, and the hands of his 2 daughters, from the pity of the Lord towards him, and brought them out, and placed them outside the city. And when they had brought them out, they then said, "Fly for your life! Look not behind you, and delay not in all the plain. Take flight to the mountains. Take yourself there." But Lot answered them, "Oh, my lords, let now your servant find favor in your sight, and increase the kindness which you have done to me, to enliven my soul. For I am not able to escape to the hills before the disaster will overtake me, and I shall die. See now this city. It is easy to escape there. In a little time I can escape to there. Is it not a trifle? And my life will be preserved." So one replied to him, "Yes, I will accept your presents. Also for this thing, I will not destroy this town on behalf of which you have spoken. Be quick to escape there, for I am not able to do the thing until you arrive there." He accordingly called the name of that place Zoar. The sun had risen above the land when Lot entered Zoar. The ever-living then rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah lightning and fire from the ever-living from the skies, and overwhelmed those towns, them and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the towns, and the produce of the land. But his wife looked back, and was transformed into a pillar of salt. And when Abraham went in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and looked out towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and towards all the land of the plain, he saw and perceived a stench and smoke rise up from the country, like the smoke from a furnace. Thus it was that God destroyed the cities of the plain. But God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot beyond the reach of the destruction with which he destroyed those towns where Lot lived. And Lot went up from Zoar, and settled in the hills along with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. So he lived in a cave along with his 2 daughters. And the elder said to the younger, "Our father grows old, and there is not a man in the country to come to us as others do all the world over. Come on, let us make our father drunk with wine, and cohabit with him, and it may be that we shall have children by our father." So they made their father drunk with wine that night, and the elder went and lay with her father, but he was not aware of the fact when she lay down or rose up. It was some time afterwards that the elder said to the younger, "See, I went with my father the other night. Let us make him drunk with wine also tonight, and you can go and lie with him, and it may be you will have children by your father." So they made their father drunk also that night with wine, and the younger rose and went with him, and he knew not when she lay down or when she rose up. Thus both of the daughters of Lot conceived from their father. Then the elder gave birth to a son, and she called his name Moab. He was the ancestor of Moab of today. And the younger also gave birth to a son, and she called his name Ben-Ami. He was the ancestor of Ammon of today. Chapter 20. Abraham then removed quietly from there landward, and settled between Kadesh and the wall, and resided in Gerar. And as Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister," Abimelech the king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. God, however, came to Abimelech in a dream at night, and said, "Beware of death because of this woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." But Abimelech had not made advances to her. So he replied, "My lord, would you kill a just person? Has not this man said to me, 'She is my sister'? And did not she herself say to me, 'He is my brother'? In the honesty of my heart and the innocence of my hand I have done this." Then God said to him in a dream, "I also know that in the honesty of your heart you have done this, so I restrained you. I also warned you from sin against me, therefore I did not permit you to approach her. So now return the woman to her husband, for he is a great teacher, and will intercede for you. But if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die, and all that you have." When Abimelech awoke in the morning, he called his ministers, and related in their hearing the whole of these events, and the men were greatly afraid. Abimelech consequently called Abraham and asked him, "What have you done to us? And what have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom this great danger for acts they have not done? You have done us a wrong." And Abimelech continued to Abraham, "What have you seen, that you have done this thing?" But Abraham replied, "I said that perhaps there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. And indeed she is my sister, the daughter-in-law of my father, but not of my mother, and she was given to me for a wife. But when God caused me to be a wanderer from my father's house, then I said to her, 'This is the kindness which you shall show to me in every place where we come. Say I am your brother.'" Abimelech, however, took sheep, oxen, slaves, and girls, and gave to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, "See, my country is before you. Stay wherever it is good for your eyes." While to Sarah he said, "I have given 1,000 gifts to this brother of yours, for he must be a covering of the eyes to all who are with you, and to all who meet you." Then Abraham appealed for Abimelech to God, and God made the wives of Abimelech fruitful, and his servants as well, and they gave birth to children, because the ever-living had sterilized those of the household of Abimelech on account of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Chapter 21. The ever-living afterwards effected with Sarah what he had promised, and the Lord did for Sarah that which he had said. And Sarah conceiving gave birth to a son to Abraham in his old age, in the way that God had promised him. Abraham accordingly gave the son born to him by Sarah the name of Isaac, and Abraham circumcised Isaac on the 8th day, as God had instructed him. And Abraham was then 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah then said, "God has made a delight for me, for he has heard my laugh to him. All who hear will laugh with me." And she continued, "For Abraham I am a flowing brook. He has made me suckle children, for I have borne a son to his age." When the lad grew and was weaned, Abraham celebrated the weaning of Isaac with a great feast. Sarah also saw the son which Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham, playing, and said to Abraham, "Drive out my maid and her son, for the son of this slave shall not be an inheritor with my son Isaac." But in Abraham's view this speech was very bad in regard to his son. But God said to Abraham, "Let it not be disheartening in your sight. Do all that Sarah has said against the lad, and against his mother. Listen to what she says, for from Isaac I will nominate an heir to you, and also from the son of your second wife I will found a great nation, for he is your heir." Abraham accordingly rose up at dawn, and taking bread and a skin of water, he placed them on the shoulder of Hagar and the lads, and sent her away. And she went and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was exhausted, however, she placed the lad under a bush, and went and seated herself on the other side. For she said, "I shall not then see the lad's death." So she rested on the other side, and she raised her voice and wept. God then heard the voice of the youth, and a messenger of God called from the sky to Hagar, and said to her, "What, Hagar, is the matter? Be not afraid, for God has heard the voice of the lad from where he is. Arise, take the lad and support him, for I will make from him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a spring of water, and she gave the lad a drink. Thus God gave life to the lad, and he grew, and dwelt in the desert, and became a mighty archer, and settled in the desert of Paran, and she took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. It was about this time that Abimelech and Phicol the commander of his army addressed Abraham, saying, "God is with you in all that you do. So now take an oath to me before God that you may not deceive, and to my children and posterity that the kindness which I have shown to you, you will show to me, and to the land where you have been a foreigner." And Abraham replied, "I will take the oath." Abraham then reproved Abimelech about the affair of the well of water, which the servants of Abimelech had stolen. Then Abimelech answered, "I did not myself know of that matter, and neither did you report it to me, and I never heard it until today." Abraham then took sheep and oxen and gave to Abimelech, and the two entered into a treaty. Abimelech then asked Abraham, "What are these 7 lambs for which you have put by themselves?" "You take these 7 lambs from my hand," he answered, "that they may be an evidence for me that I dug this well." They accordingly called that place the Well of the Oath, and he entered into a treaty at the Well of the Oath, with both Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army. Then they returned to the land of the Philistines. They also planted tamarisk trees by the Well of the Oath, and called there on the name of the ever-living eternal God. So Abraham remained in the land of the Philistines for many days. The end of chapters 15 through 21 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Genesis, chapters 22 through 28. Chapter 22. After these events, God tried Abraham and said to him, "Abraham!" And he said, "I am here." Then he said, "Take your son, your peculiar one whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of vision, and offer him there as a burnt offering upon one of the hills which I will point out to you." When Abraham woke in the morning, he saddled his ass, and took 2 youths along with him, and Isaac his son, and split up wood for a sacrifice. And they rose up and went to the place which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham looked up and saw the spot some distance off. Then Abraham said to his attendants, "Stay here by yourselves with the ass, and the lad and I will go and worship, and will then return to you." Abraham accordingly took the wood for the sacrifice, and placed it upon Isaac his son, and took in his own hand the fire and the knife, and the 2 went together. Isaac then said to Abraham his father, "My father?" And he replied, "I am here, my son." "There is fire and wood," he said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" "God," answered Abraham, "will provide a lamb for himself for a burnt offering, my son." So they went on together. When they came to the place that God had commanded him, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him upon the altar, upon the top of the wood. Then Abraham stretched out his hand, and took the knife to slaughter his son. But a messenger from the ever-living called to him from the skies, and said, "Abraham! Abraham!" And he replied, "I am here." "Stretch not your hand against the young man," he said, "nor do to him what you intended. For now I know that you reverence God, and would not withhold from me your son, your special one." Abraham then looked up and saw a goat caught in a bush by its horns. So Abraham went and took the goat, and offered it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham therefore called the name of that place Jehovah-Ireh. Then the messenger of the ever-living called again to Abraham from the skies, and said to him, "I promise, the Lord declares, that because you have done this thing and not held back your special son, that when blessing I will bless you, and when increasing I will increase your race as the stars of the skies, and like the sand upon the seashore, and your race shall possess the gates of its enemies, and I will benefit all the nations of the earth through your heir, because you have listened to my voice. Abraham afterwards returned to his attendants, and they rose up and went back to the well of the oath. After these events a message was delivered to Abraham. Your sister Milcah has given birth to children to Nahor your brother, Uz and his brother Buz, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Kesed, and Hazo, and Kildash, and Zidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel has produced Rebekah. These 8 Milcah has borne to Nahor your brother. And his second wife, whose name is Reumah, she also has given birth to Tabach, and Gaham, and Thahash, and Makkah. Chapter 23. Now the life of Sarah was 127 years, the whole of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn and lament for Sarah. Then Abraham rose up from the presence of his dead, and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying,
I am a foreigner and wanderer with you. Give me the possession of a grave among you, and I can bury my dead from my sight.
And the sons of Heth replied to Abraham, We listen to my lord, who stands like a god among us. Choose from our tombs a grave for your dead. None of us will deny his tomb to you, where you can bury your dead. Then Abraham rose up and bowed to the people of the land, to the sons of Heth, and addressed them, saying,
If it is in your minds to let my dead be buried from my sight, listen to me, and apply for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, and let him sell to me the cave of Machpelah, which is within the boundaries of his land. He shall sell it to me for full value as a tomb possessed among you.
Now Ephron resided among the sons of Heth, and Ephron spoke after Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, to all who came to the gates of the town, saying, No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you as a grave to bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed to the people of the land, and addressed Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying,
Nay, if you are disposed to listen to me, I will pay you money for the field. So accept it from me, and I will bury my dead there.
Then Ephron, in reply to Abraham, said, My lord, listen to me. For 400 shekels of money between me and you, the land is yours, and you can bury your dead. So Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the money which he had agreed upon, in the sight of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver currency. Thus he bought the field of Ephron that is in Machpelah, which is opposite Mamre, the field and the cave which is in it, and all the trees which were in the field, with all the hedge around it. Thus Abraham bought it in the presence of the sons of Heth, of all who came to the gate of the town. And after that Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, opposite Mamre, in the land of Canaan. And the field with the cave in it was acquired by Abraham for a burial ground from the sons of Heth. Chapter 24. Abraham, however, grew old and advanced in years, and the Lord had prospered Abraham in everything. Then Abraham said to his servant, the chief of his household and steward over all he had,
I wish you to put your hand under my thigh, and take an oath to me by the ever-living, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the Canaanites, among whom I reside, but that you will go to my old family and take a wife for my son Isaac.
But the servant asked him, If a woman does not desire to come along with me to this country, shall I return and take your son to the land from which you came? When Abraham, in reply to him, said, Be careful not to take my son there. The ever-living, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's home and from the land of my birth,
and who spoke to me and also took oath to me, saying, I will give this country to your race. He will send his messenger before you, and you will bring a wife for my son from there. But if a woman does not desire to come along with you, then you shall be free from this oath, except that you must never take my son there."
Abraham's servant accordingly put his hand under the thigh of his master, and took an oath to him upon this matter. The servant afterwards took 10 camels of his master, and plenty of his master's wealth in his hand, and rose up and went to Aram between the rivers, to the town of Nahor. And he knelt the camels outside the town, at the well of water, in the evening, at the time when they came out to draw water, and prayed, "Ever-living God of my master Abraham, turn now your face today, and do a kindness to my master Abraham. I am here encamped at the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the town will come out to draw water. So let it be that when the girl to whom I say, 'Hand me your jar, and I will drink,' if she replies, 'Drink, and I will also give drink to your camels,' let your servant take her to Isaac, for by that I shall know that you will do a kindness to my master." And so it happened, as he was coming to the end of his prayer, that Rebekah, who was the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, wife of Nahor, the brother of Abraham, came out with a bucket upon her shoulder. And the girl was very beautiful to look upon, a maiden who had no sweetheart. And she ran to the well, filled her bucket, and drew it up. The steward was delighted, and spoke to her, and said, "Will you give me a drink of a little of the water from your bucket?" "Drink, sir," was her reply, and she tripped on, and lowered her bucket to her hand, and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she added, "And now I will draw for your camels, that they may all have a drink." Then she ran and carried her bucket to the spring, and dipped it into the well to draw, and she drew for all the camels. The man watched her silently to know whether or not the ever-living had granted prosperity to his journey. And when she had watered all the camels, then the man took a brooch of gold of 1/2 shekel, and placed on her arms 2 bracelets of rich gold of 1 shekel, and said, "My girl, will you now ask the men of your father's house for a place for us to lodge in?" And she answered him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she had to Nahor." And she continued, "We have plenty of straw and fodder, and room enough for you to lodge." Then the man bowed and thanked the ever-living, and said, "Thank the ever-living God of my master Abraham, who has not forgotten his goodness and truth to my master, for the ever-living has led me to the house of the brother of my master." And the girl ran and reported to the house of her mother, as it is here related, and to Rebekah's brother, whose name was Laban. Then Laban rose to go to the man who rested near the well, when he saw the brooches and the bracelets on the hands of his sister, and heard the words of Rebekah his sister, "That the man said this to me." He went to the man, who remained by the well with his camels, and said, "Come in, you blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside when I offer you the house and a stable for your camels?" Then the man entered his house, and he unloaded the camels, and gave straw and fodder to the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of the young men who were with him. He also placed food before them. But he replied, "I will not eat until I have delivered my message." "Speak," he said. "I am the servant of Abraham," he answered, "and the ever-living has prospered my master very greatly, and has given to him sheep and oxen, and silver and gold, and men and women servants, camels and asses. Sarah also, my master's wife, had a son to my master, a son in his old age, and he will give him all he has. Now my master has pledged me to say, 'Take not a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I reside in their land, but go instead to the home of my father, and choose a wife for my son from among my own family.' I replied to my master, 'Perhaps the woman will not come with me.' Then he said to me, 'The ever-living, who has caused me to walk in his presence, will send his messenger along with you, and he will guide you in your path, so as to secure a wife for my son from among the children of my own tribe, and from the home of my father. So take an oath to me that you will go to my tribe, and if they will not give to you, you shall be free from your oath to me.' And I came today to the well, and said, 'Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if it pleases you, point me to the path that I should follow. See, I have arrived at this well of water. So let it be that when a young girl comes to draw, when I say to her, 'Give me a little water from your bucket,' and she answers to me, 'Drink yourself, and I will also draw for the camels,' she shall be the wife the Lord will grant to the son of my master." This speech had not come to an end on my lips, when Rebekah approached with her bucket upon her shoulder, and she dropped it into the well and drew. Then I said to her, "Pray give me a drink." And she quickly lowered the bucket from off her and said, "Drink, and I will also water your camels." So I drank, and she watered the camels as well. Then I inquired of her and asked, "My girl, who are you?" And she replied, "The daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor, whom Milcah had to him." So I placed the brooches on her brow and the bracelets upon her hands. Then I bowed to the Lord and worshipped and thanked the ever-living God of my master Abraham, who had been kind to me, leading me in the right way to the house of the brother of my master for his son. And now, if it is your will to show kindness and truth to my master, inform me, and if not, tell me so, and I will turn to the right or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "This has proceeded from the Lord. We are not able to say to you either good or ill. See, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and she shall be a wife to the son of your master, as the ever-living has directed." And when Abraham's steward heard their words, he bowed to the ground to the Lord. The steward also brought out ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold and clothing, and put them upon Rebekah, and gave treasures to her brother and mother. Then they ate and drank, he and the men with him, and rested. And rising in the morning, he said, "I will now return to my master." The brother and mother, however, said, "Let the girl remain with us a day or two. After that she shall go." He, however, replied, "If she will not go with me, then the Lord will prosper the way of return, and I will go back to my master." Then they said, "Let the girl be called, and ask her own self." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," was her reply. They therefore sent off Rebekah their sister with her nurse, and the steward of Abraham and his attendants. And they gave Rebekah their blessing, and said to her, "You are our sister. Increase to thousands, and may your descendants possess the gate of their enemies." Then they lifted Rebekah and her attendants, and placed them upon camels, and they rode after the man. Thus the steward took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac was traveling towards the well of vision, for he resided in the south country, and he had come out to meditate in the field at the approach of the evening, and there he raised his eyes and looked, and saw camels coming. Rebekah also raised her eyes, and saw Isaac, and dismounted from her camel, and asked the steward, "What man is that who walks in the field?" And the steward replied, "He is my master." So she took a veil and put it on. Then the steward reported to Isaac all the things that he had done, and Isaac brought her to the tent of his mother Sarah. So he took Rebekah, and she was a wife to him, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother. Chapter 25. Abraham prospered, and he took a wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimram, and Yokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shuach. And Yokshan begot Sheba, and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Ashurim, and Tushim, and Lamim. And the sons of Midian, Aipha, and Apher, and Hanok, and Abidah, and Eldaha. All were descendants from Keturah. Abraham left all that was with him to Isaac, but to the sons of the secondary wives that Abraham had, Abraham gave fortunes, and sent them from his son Isaac, during his own life, to the east of the eastern country. These were the days of the life of Abraham that he lived, 175 years. So Abraham expired and died, a fine gray-headed old man, and satisfied. And they placed him with his people, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, on the estate of Ephron the son of Zohar the Kivite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham bought from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God prospered Isaac his son, and he resided at the well of vision. Now these are the sons of Ishmael, son of Abraham, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, the slave of Sarah, had by Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, by the names of their families. The eldest of Ishmael was Nebaioth, and Kedar, and Abdal, and Mibsam, Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, Kader, and Thema, Zetur, Naphish, and Kadma. These were sons of Ishmael, and these their names, by their villages and towers, 12 men by their nations. The years of the life of Ishmael were 137 years, when he expired and died, and was added to his people. And they took him from Havilah to the wall, which is between Egypt and the road to Ashur, laying him with all his relatives. And these are the children of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac. And Isaac son of Abraham was 40 years old when he took for his wife Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramite of Padan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramite. And Isaac prayed to the ever-living about his wife, for she was childless, and the Lord answered him. For Rebekah his wife conceived, and the children struggled together in her breast, and she consequently said, "Why does this happen to me?" So went to inquire of the ever-living. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your breast, and 2 peoples shall proceed from your womb, and one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. When her days were full for her delivery, there were twins, and the firstborn boy came out covered with hair, and she called his name Esau. Then after him came his brother, with his hand holding the heel of Esau. So they called his name Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old at the birth of them. When the lads grew up, Esau was a man skillful in hunting, a man of the field. But Jacob was a quiet man, a stayer in the tent. So Isaac loved Esau because he hunted with him, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was boiling porridge, Esau came from the field, and he was exhausted. So Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me now with that red porridge, for I am exhausted." Therefore they called his name Red Soup. But Jacob replied, "Sell me your birthright today." Then Esau answered, "Now I am going to die. What is that birthright to me?" So Jacob said, "Swear to me now at once." And he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave to Esau bread and lentil porridge, and he ate and drank, and rose up and went. Thus Esau was careless about his birthright. Chapter 26. Afterwards there was a famine in the land, beside the former famine which was in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines of Gerar. Then the ever-living appeared to him in a vision, and said, "Descend not to Mizar. Dwell in the land that I promised you. Remain in this land, and I will be with you, and will bless you. For to you and your race I will give the whole of this country as a dwelling. And I will complete the oath which I swore to your father Abraham, and I will increase your race like the stars of the sky. And I will give to your race the whole of this country for a home, and I will bless all the nations of the earth through your heir, in accordance with what I promised to Abraham according to my words, if you will carefully keep my commands and statutes and laws." So Isaac remained in Gerar. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he replied, "She is my sister." For he feared to say, "My wife," lest the men of the place should murder him for Rebekah, for she was beautiful to look on. After he had resided a considerable time, it happened that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, was looking out of his window, when he saw Isaac sporting with his wife Rebekah. Abimelech therefore summoned Isaac and said, "Now she is your wife. Then why did you say to me, 'She is my sister'?" And Isaac answered, "Because I said to myself, I fear they will kill me because of her." "Why did you do so to us?" Abimelech said. "Perhaps one of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought sin upon us." Abimelech therefore commanded to all his people, saying, "Whoever touches this man, he shall as surely die." Isaac, however, removed from that country and went to Bashan, he and his possessions, and the ever-living prospered him. Thus the man traveled about and increased until he was very great. He also had flocks of sheep and herds of cattle, and many servants, and the Philistines were envious of him. So the Philistines filled with earth all the wells that the servants of his father Abraham had dug in his days. Abimelech also said to Isaac, "Go from among us, for you are much stronger than we." So Isaac went from there and encamped by the river Gerar, and remained there. Isaac also settled and cleared out the wells of water which were dug in the time of his father Abraham, and he called them by the names they were called in the days of his father. The servants of Isaac also dug in the valley, and discovered there a spring of living water. But the shepherds of Gerar contended with the shepherds of Isaac, and said, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Strife, because they disputed with him. He therefore dug another well, and they contended about that also. So he called its name Contention. He then removed from there and dug another well, and they did not fight over it. So he called its name Room Enough, for he said, "Now, Lord, you have given us room, and made us fruitful in the land." Afterwards he arose from there and went to the well of the oath. And the ever-living appeared to him that night, and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, I am with you, and will bless you and increase your race, because of my servant Abraham." Then he built an altar at the place, and called on the name of the ever-living, and he pitched his tent there. The servants of Isaac also dug a well. But Abimelech went to him from Gerar, with his chief herdsmen, and Pichol, the general of his army. Isaac therefore asked them, "Why have you come to me, when you are my enemies, and have driven me from among you?" And they replied, "We are terribly afraid, because God is with you. So we would say, let there now be an understanding between us and you, and let a treaty be made with you, so that you will not do wrong to us, if we do not touch you, and as we have certainly done good to you, and sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the ever-living." He therefore made them a feast, and they ate and drank, and rose up in the morning, when they swore each to his brother. Then Isaac sent them away, and they went from him in peace. In the same day also the servants of Isaac came and informed him about the well which they had dug, and they said, "We have found water." He therefore called it Satisfaction. Consequently the name of the village by that well is called Satisfaction to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as a wife Judith, the daughter of Barai the Hittite, and Basmath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. But they were a bitter wind to Isaac and Rebekah. Chapter 27. And when Isaac was old, and his eyes dim that he could not see, he called his eldest son Esau, and said to him, "My son?" And he replied, "I am here." Then he said, "See now, I am old, and I know not the day of my death. So now take up your spear, quiver, and bow, and go to the field and hunt venison for me, and make me tasty food such as I love, and bring it to me, and I will eat it, so that my soul may bless you before I die." But Rebekah heard the speech of Isaac to Esau his son, and that Esau had gone to the field to hunt venison to bring in. Then Rebekah spoke to Jacob her son, and said,
"I have just heard your father speak to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring to me venison, and make me tasty food, that I may eat it, and I will bless you before I die.' So now, my son, listen to my voice to do what I shall order you. Go to the flock, and select for me 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make tasty food for your father, such as he loves, and you shall carry it to your father when he will eat, and because of it he will bless you before his death."
But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. When my father feels me, I shall be in his eyes like a swindler, and shall bring a curse on myself, and not a blessing." His mother, however, said to him,
"Let any curse for you come on me, my son. Only you go and do as I tell you."
He consequently went and did it, and brought to his mother, and she made for him tasty food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took some of the clothes of her son Esau, which were in the house with her, and put them on her younger son Jacob, and put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands, and the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the dainties and the bread which she had made into the hand of her younger son Jacob. And he went to his father and said to him, Father? And he replied, I am here. Who are you? When Jacob answered, I am your eldest son Esau. I have done as you asked me. Rise now, turn and eat of my venison, so that your soul may bless me. Isaac, however, asked his son, How is it you have been so quick in meeting with it, my son? So he replied, Because your ever-living God brought it before me. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Come near me, my son, and I will feel if you are really my son Esau or no. So Jacob approached to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Therefore he did not detect him, because his hands were like the hands of his brother Esau, hairy, and he was thankful. Yet he asked, Are you really my son Esau? And he replied, I am. Then he said, Bring it to me, and I will eat of the venison of my son, so that my soul may bless you. He consequently presented it to him, and he ate. And he brought wine to him, and he drank. Then Isaac his father said, Come close, my son, and give me a drink. So he approached and gave him a drink. And he smelt the smell of his clothes, and was satisfied, and said, Yes, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field, which the Lord has blessed. So may God give to you the dew from the skies, and the fatness of the earth, and increase and possession. Nations shall serve you and bow down to you. Yes, a multitude of mighty peoples with your brothers also shall pay tribute to you, my son. If any curses you, he shall be cursed, and if any blesses you, he shall be blessed. But it happened that as Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had gone away from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came with his venison, and he also had made dainties, and brought them to his father, and said to his father, Arise, my father, and eat of the venison of your son, so that your soul may bless me. Isaac his father, however, asked of him, Who are you? And he replied, I am your firstborn son Esau. Then Isaac was terrified with a very great terror, and asked, Who then is he who has hunted venison, and brought it to me? And I have eaten of all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he must be blessed. When Esau heard the speech of his father, then he cried with a very great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me, also me, my father. But he replied, Your brother has come with deception and stolen your blessing. And he answered, He was rightly named Tripper-up, for he has tricked me this twice, to take my birthright, and also now to take my blessing. Then he asked, Have you not a blessing left for me? But Isaac replied and said to Esau, Since I have made him your master, and have given all his brothers to him for servants, and with increase and possession I have endowed him, where now, my son, is there anything I can do? But Esau said to his father, Is there then only one blessing with you, my father? Bless me also, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, Yes, in the most fertile land shall be your dwelling, and with the dew from the skies above. And you shall live by your sword, but shall serve your brother. Yet when you extend, you shall break his yoke from off your neck. But Esau hated Jacob for the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The day approaches for the mourning of my father, when I will kill my brother. But the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah. So she sent and called her younger son Jacob, and said to him, Now Esau your brother intends to kill you. Consequently, my son, listen to my voice,
And arise and go away to Laban my brother at Charan, and stay with him for some time, until the anger of your brother has passed away. When the rage of your brother against you has passed, and he forgets what you have done to him, I will send and fetch you from there. Why should I be deprived of both in one day?"
Then Rebekah said to Isaac,
"I hate my life in the presence of these Hittite girls. If Jacob should take a wife from among these Hittite girls, such girls as they are in this country, why should I live?"
Chapter 28. Consequently Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him, and commanded him not to take a wife from the girls of Canaan. "Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban your mother's brother. And may Almighty God bless you, and make you fruitful, and increase, and may you become an assembly of nations. And may he give the blessings of Abraham to you and your race with you, to inherit the land of your strangerhood, which God gave to Abraham." Thus Isaac sent off Jacob, and he traveled to Padan Aram, to Laban the son of Bethuel the Arami, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. But when Esau knew that Isaac had blessed Jacob, and sent him to Padan Aram to take himself a wife from there to comfort him, and had ordered him, saying, "Take not a wife from the girls of Canaan," and that Jacob had listened to the voice of his father and mother, and had gone to Padan Aram, then Esau perceived that the girls of Canaan were displeasing in the eyes of Isaac his father. So Esau went to Ishmael, and took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael the son of Abraham, the sister of Nebaioth, besides his other wives, as a wife to himself. Jacob, however, set out from the well of the oath, and traveled to Charan. And he arrived at a place, and rested there, for it was sunset. So he took one of the stones of the place, and put it for his pillow, and laid down in the spot. Then he dreamed, and saw a ladder with its foot standing on the ground, and its head reaching to the heavens. And there were messengers of God ascending and descending it. And he saw the ever-living stationed above it, who said, "I am the ever-living God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land which you now lie upon I will give to you and your race. And your race shall be like the dust of the earth, and shall spread west and east and north and south, and all the nations of the world shall be benefited by you and your heir. Be assured also that I am with you, and will guard you wherever you go, and I will give you a quiet return to this country, for I will not forsake you until I have accomplished what I have promised to you." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep, and exclaimed, "The ever-living is certainly in this place, and I knew it not." So he was afraid, and said, "How terrible this place is! Is not this truly the house of God? And this the gate of heaven?" Jacob, however, slept until morning, when he took the stone which he had placed for a pillow, and sat it upright, and poured oil on the top of it, and called the name of that place God's house. But Andamloz was its former name. Then Jacob vowed a vow, saying, "If the ever-living God is with me, and will guard me in the way that I now go, and give to me bread to eat and clothing to put on, and bring me back safely to the house of my father, then the ever-living shall be my God. And this stone which I placed for a pillow shall be a house of God, and of all that you give to me, I will return a 10th part to you." The end of chapters 22 through 28 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Genesis, chapters 29 through 35. Chapter 29. Then Jacob arose onto his feet, and went towards the land of the sons of the east. And he looked and saw a well in the field, and there were by it 3 flocks of sheep lying down, for from that well they watered the flocks. But a great stone was on the mouth of the well. So when all the flocks had collected there, they rolled away the stone and watered the sheep, and then returned the stone unto the mouth of the well until another time. Jacob therefore asked them, Brothers, where do you come from? And they replied, We are from Canaan. Then he asked them if they knew Laban the son of Nahor. When they answered, We know him. He next asked them, Is he well? And they said, He is well, and here is Rachel his daughter coming with his sheep. Then he asked, Look, it is full day already. Is it not time to water the cattle and sheep, that they may go and feed? But they replied, We cannot until all the flocks are collected, and they roll away the stone from off the mouth of the well and water the sheep. Whilst he was speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she shepherded them. But it happened that when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, the brother of his mother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob rolled the stone from off the mouth of the well and watered the sheep of his mother's brother Laban. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob said to Rachel, I do it because I am a relative of your father, and because I am the son of Rebekah. So she ran and reported it to her father. When Laban had heard the report about Jacob, the son of his sister, he ran to invite him and embraced him and kissed him, and brought him to his home, where he related to Laban all these events. Then Laban said, You are my bone and my flesh. So he stayed 5 days with him, when Laban said to Jacob, Since you are my relative, now serve me, and also inform me what wages I shall pay you. Now Laban had 2 daughters, the name of the eldest Leah, and the name of the youngest Rachel. But the eyes of Leah were timid, and those of Rachel perfect in form and beautiful to see, and Jacob loved Rachel. So he replied, I will serve you 7 years for your youngest daughter Rachel. Laban then replied, Good, she shall be yours. I will give her for a wife after you have stayed with me. So Jacob waited for Rachel 7 years, but they were to him like a single day because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for the time is up, and I will go to her. Laban then collected all the men of the place and made a feast. And when it was dark, he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went to her. Laban also gave Zilpah his servant to Leah to be her servant. But when it was morning, he discovered it was Leah, and said to Laban, Why have you done this to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Then why have you cheated me? But Laban answered, It is not our custom in this country to give the younger before the elder. Count the 7 for this. Then I will give to you also the other, and for her you shall serve with me another 7 years afterwards. Jacob therefore agreed to it, that he would serve thus. So he gave Rachel his daughter to him for a wife. Laban also gave to Rachel Bilhah his servant to be her servant. He therefore went to Rachel, and he loved Rachel completely, and served to him other 7 years afterwards. But the ever-living saw that he hated Leah, so he opened her womb, but Rachel was childless. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said that, The ever-living has looked on my sorrow, so that now my husband may love me. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, Now the ever-living has heard that he hates me, so he has given to me also this. And she called his name Simeon. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, Now certainly my husband will cling to me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore she called his name Levi. She also conceived again and bore a son, and she said, This time I will praise the Lord. So she called his name Judah. Then she ceased to bear children. Chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she bore no child to Jacob, she envied her sister, and said to Jacob, Give me children, and if not, I shall die. But Jacob's anger fired at Rachel, and he answered, Am I in the place of God to hold back from you the fruit of your body? She therefore said, See now my attendant Bilhah. Go to her, and she shall bear at my knee, so that I also myself shall have children from her. So she gave to him Bilhah her servant for a wife. And Jacob went to her, and she conceived and bore a son to Jacob. Then Rachel said, God has done me justice, and also has heard my voice, and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. Again Bilhah the servant of Rachel conceived and bore a son to Jacob, when Rachel exclaimed, I struggled with God, I also struggled with my sister. So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she ceased to bear, she took Zilpah her attendant, and gave her to Jacob for a wife. So Zilpah the servant of Leah bore a son to Jacob. Then Leah said, By a troop, and called his name Gad. Zilpah the attendant of Leah also bore a second son to Jacob, and Leah exclaimed, I am blessed, for the women will bless me. She therefore called his name Asher. Reuben once went out at the time of wheat harvest, and found love apples in the field, and brought them to Leah his mother, when Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray, some of your son's love apples. But she said, Is it a trifle that you have taken my husband? And would you also take the apples of my son? When Rachel replied, Come now, he shall sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's apples. When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah met him and said to him, You must come, for I have hired you with the love apples of my son, so sleep with me tonight. And God heard Leah, so she conceived and bore a fifth son to Jacob. Leah therefore said, God has paid me wages because I gave my servant to my husband. She therefore called his name Issachar. Leah afterwards conceived again a sixth son to Jacob. Then Leah said, God has endowed me, even me, with a good dowry, so that my husband will live with me, for I have borne him 6 sons. Therefore she called his name Zebulun. She afterwards also bare a daughter, and called her name Dinah. But God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her, and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. Then she said, God has taken away my reproach. She therefore called his name Joseph, saying, The ever-living has added to me another son. But it occurred that when Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, Send me away, and I will go to my own home and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children, whom I have served you for, because I must go with them, for you know the wages for which I have served to you. But he replied, Name your wages to me, and I will give you them. So he answered him, You know how I have served you, and how your herds have been with me. For they were small that were with you before me, and they have spread out to many, and the ever-living has blessed you at my feet. Yet have I gained even a house of my own? But he replied, What shall I give? Then Jacob answered, You shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will conduct your sheep and guard them. I will go over all your sheep today, counting every sheep speckled or spotted, and every black sheep among the lambs, and every spotted or speckled in the rams. They shall be my wages. And you shall assign them justly to me from today forward as my wages from you. All that is not spotted or speckled in the goats, or black in the sheep, it shall be a theft with me. And Laban replied, It shall be exactly as you say. He therefore separated on that day the marked and spotted rams, and all the marked and speckled of the goats from all that were white, and all the black sheep, and gave them to the hands of his sons, and put a 3 days' journey between them and between Jacob's. But Jacob shepherded the other sheep for Laban his father-in-law. Jacob then selected young wands of willow, and almond, and sycamore, and peeled them, peeling to the white so as to show the whiteness of the wands, and he stuck the wands which he had peeled near the watering troughs where the sheep came to drink, in the sight of the sheep, when they were hot for breeding after drinking. So the sheep were hot amongst the wands, and the sheep bore marked, and spotted, and speckled. Then Jacob separated the lambs, and placed the faces of the sheep towards the striped, and gave all the black among the sheep of Laban to his own flocks, and did not assign them to the sheep of Laban. Thus when any of the strong sheep were hot for union, then Jacob placed the wands before the eyes of the sheep, near the troughs, to inflame them among the wands. Before the feeble of the sheep, however, he placed them not. So the feeble went to Laban, and the strong to Jacob. Thus the man increased very much, and he possessed many sheep, and women and men servants, and camels, and asses. Chapter 31. However, he heard the sons of Laban talking, saying, Jacob will take all that our father has, and from what our father possessed he has made all his wealth. Jacob consequently watched the face of Laban, and perceived it was not with him as formerly. Then the ever-living said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and your birth, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his sheep, and said to them, I see that the face of your father is not with me as formerly, but the God of my fathers is with me. Now you know that with all my strength I have served your father, but your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. God, however, did not allow him to do evil to me. For when he said, 'The spotted shall be your wages,' all the sheep were spotted. But if he said, 'The streaked shall be your wages,' then all the sheep were streaked. So God took away the flocks of your father and gave them to me. It also happened in the season of the heat of the sheep, that I raised my eyes in a dream, and saw the rams leaping on the streaked, speckled, and spotted sheep. And the messenger of God said to me in the dream, 'Jacob.' And I replied, 'I am here.' Then he said, 'Lift up your eyes and see all the rams leaping on the streaked, speckled, and spotted sheep. For I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of the house of God, which you consecrated there in the pillar, which you dedicated to me, where you vowed a gift. Go from this country, and return to the country of your birth.' Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, 'What portion or inheritance is there to us in the house of our father? Are we not like strangers and outcasts to him? For he sold us, and has eaten up our money. For all the wealth which God has stripped from our father, that is ours and our children's, so do all that God has said to you.' Therefore Jacob arose and mounted his children and wives on camels, and collected the whole of his herds, and the whole of the property which he had acquired by trading, property he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Laban, however, had gone to shear his sheep, so Rachel stole the teraphim which were her father's. Thus Jacob stole away secretly from Laban the Aramee, without informing him, for he fled from him. So he fled, he and all he possessed, and they went up and crossed over the river, and he set his face to Mount Gilead. But on the 3rd day it was reported to Laban that Jacob had fled. Then he took his relatives with him and pursued after him, a 7 days' journey, and came up with him at Mount Gilead. But God appeared to Laban the Aramee in a dream by night, and said to him, 'Guard yourself in what you do to Jacob, for either good or ill.' Laban, however, overtook Jacob, and Jacob had pitched his tent on the hill, but Laban with his relatives on Mount Gilead. Laban then said to Jacob, 'What have you done? You have carried away my daughters like captives, desolate. Why did you steal away to fly and deceive me, and not inform me, when I would have sent you away with pleasure, and with the sound of drums and harps? You have not even let me kiss my children and your children. You have acted like a fool. Truly there is a God who guides me from evil in acting with you. For the God of your father last night said to me, Guard yourself in dealing with Jacob for good or ill. So go your journey, for you desire the house of your father. But why have you stolen my gods?' Then Jacob replied, 'Because I was afraid, for I said he will certainly steal his daughters from me. If, however, you find your gods, it is not known to me. Go round what is with me, and take your own.' For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Laban therefore went round the tent of Jacob and the tent of Leah, and to the tents of the 2 mothers, and did not find them. Consequently he left the tent of Leah and went to the tent of Rachel. But Rachel had taken the teraphim and placed them under the camel saddle, and sat upon them. So Laban searched all the tent, and could not find. And she said to her father, 'Let it not grieve your eyes, my lord, that I am not able to rise before you, for the way of women is on me.' So he searched and did not find the teraphim. Then Jacob was furious and abused Laban. And Jacob was savage and said to Laban, 'What is my fault, and what is my sin, that you have come after me? Now you have searched all my goods. What have you found of all the goods of your house? Put it before my people and your people, and they shall decide between us. During the 20 years I have been with you, I have not lost a sheep or a goat of yours, and I have never eaten a ram of your flock. I have not brought you the maimed. I have borne the loss from my own hand. I have restored to you the stolen by day and the stolen by night. I have borne the heat by day and the cold by night, and my eyes never rested. This 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your sheep, and you cheated me over my wages 10 times. If the God of my father Abraham and the worshipped of Isaac had not been with me, then you would have sent me away empty. But God saw my weary feet and defended me last night.' But Laban answered and said to Jacob,
The girls are my girls, and the children my children, and the sheep my sheep, and all that you see is mine. And for the girls, what shall I do for them, or the children which they have borne? However, now, come on, and let you and me make a settlement, and let it be a witness between myself and you." Then Jacob took a stone and set it up with both his hands, and Jacob said to his father-in-law, "Let them collect stones." So they collected stones and made a heap. Then they feasted on the heap there, and Laban called it for himself the heap of witnesses. But Jacob called it for himself the heap of evidence. Laban also said, "This heap is a witness between me and between you today." Therefore they called its name Gilad, and a watchtower, for he said, "Let the ever-living watch between me and between you to keep each from evil. If you grieve my daughters, and if you take wives beside my daughters, when we are not together, let God see the witness between me and you." Then Laban added to Jacob, "See this heap, and see the pillar which I have raised between me and between you. Witness this heap, and witness this pillar, if I should pass over to you beyond this heap, or if you should pass over to me beyond this heap and this pillar for evil. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor judge between us, the God of our fathers." Jacob then swore by the worship of his father Isaac. And Jacob sacrificed a sacrifice on the heap, and invited his relatives to eat bread. So they ate bread, and they rested on the heap. Chapter 32. Laban then rose up in the morning, and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them, and went and returned to his own place. But Jacob continued his journey, and a messenger of God met him. So Jacob said, "What a glorious encampment of God this place is!" Therefore he called the name of that place the Encampment. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau at Mount Seir in the land of Edom, and he commanded them, saying, "You shall say this to my lord Esau, Jacob your servant says thus, I have lodged with Laban and stayed until now, and there are with me bullocks and asses and sheep and serving men and women, so I have sent to inform my lord to find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they reported, "We went to your brother, to Esau, and he is also coming to call upon you, and 400 men with him." Jacob consequently was very greatly afraid, and it distressed him. So he divided the people who were with him, and the sheep and the cattle and camels, into 2 camps. "Because," he said, "if Esau comes to the one camp and assails it, then there will be the other to fly to." Jacob also said, "God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, 'Return to the land of your birth, and I will be good to you,' I am unworthy of all the mercies and of all the support which you have shown to me when I, your servant, passed over this torrent with my staff, and I am returning as 2 camps. Grant me a deliverance from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear that he will come and cut off mothers with children. But you have said, 'Supporting, I will support you, and I will make your race like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted for quantity.'" So he rested there that night. Then he took presents in his hand, presents for his brother Esau, 100 goats and 20 he-goats, 100 sheep and 20 rams, 30 suckling camels with their foals, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 asses. And he put them under the hands of servants separately, troop by troop, and said to his servants, "Go before me and spread a space between troop and troop." He also ordered the foremost, saying, "If you meet Esau my brother, and he asks you, 'Who are you, and where are you going, and whose are these before you?' you shall reply, 'From your servant, from Jacob, a present he sends to my lord, to Esau. And look, also he is behind us.'" He ordered the second also, with the third, with all the servants who followed after them, repeating, "You shall say the same words to Esau if he meets with you, and you shall also say to him, 'See, your servant Jacob is behind us.'" For he remarked, "I will pacify him first by the presents that I send to him, and afterwards I will see by his face whether or not I can stand before him." Thus he sent presents over before him, but he himself stopped that night in the camp. However, he arose at night and took his 2 wives and the 2 second wives and his 11 lads, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. So he took them and passed them over the brook, and sent over all who were with him.
Jacob, however, was left alone by himself, and a man wrestled with him until the departure of the darkness. He saw, however, that he was not equal to him, so he touched him in the hollow of the thigh, and struck the hollow of the thigh of Jacob, whilst wrestling with him. Then he said, "Release me, for the darkness is going." But he replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Then he answered, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." When he responded, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with a divine messenger as with men, and been equal to it." Then Jacob asked and said, "Tell me your name." And he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" But he then blessed him. Jacob consequently called the name of that place Peniel, that is, God's face. "For I have seen divinities face to face, and preserved my life." And the sun arose on him as he crossed over from Peniel, but he limped on his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel do not eat the sinew nerve from the foot to the thigh until this day, for he struck Jacob in the sinew nerve at the hollow of the thigh. Chapter 33. Then Jacob raised his eyes and saw that Esau approached, and 400 men with him. So he separated the children of Leah and of Rachel and of the 2 second wives, and placed the second wives and their children in the front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph behind. But he passed to the front of them and bowed to the earth 7 times, whilst approaching to his brother. But Esau rushed forwards, and called to and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and wept. Then he lifted his eyes, and saw the wives and children, and asked, "Who are these with you?" And he replied, "The children which God has given me, your servant." Then the second wives approached with their children, and they bowed. Leah also came forward, and her children, and they bowed, and afterwards Joseph and Rachel, and they bowed. So he asked, "What is all this camp with you which approaches me?" When he replied, "To find favor in the eyes of my lord." Esau, however, answered, "I have plenty, my brother. Let your own remain to yourself." But Jacob said, "Not so. If now I have found favor in your eyes, take a present from my hand. For certainly I have seen your face, as if I had seen the face of God, and am delighted. Now do take the things which I have brought to you, for God has favored me, and because there is plenty for me as well." So he pressed him until he took them. Then he said, "I will rise up and travel, and we will go along together." But he answered him, "My lord knows that the children are many, and the sheep and the cattle with me are breeding, so if we drive them a single day, then all the sheep will die. But let my lord now go before me, and I will be traveling at my ease, according to the pace of the guide before me, and the pace of the children, until that I come to my lord at Seir." But Esau said, "I will then assign to you some of the people who are with me." And he replied, "Why have I found this favor in the eyes of my lord?" So Esau returned that day on his journey to Seir, but Jacob pitched his tent and built himself a house and cattle yards, making an encampment. Therefore he called the name of the place Scuth. Afterwards Jacob went quietly to the village of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his return from Padan Aram, and encamped before the village, and bought that part of the land, where he pitched his tent, from the hand of the son of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 kesitahs. He also built an altar there, and called on God, the God of Israel. Chapter 34. But it happened that Dinah the daughter of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the country. And Shechem, the son of Hamor, the chief of the country, saw, and seized her, and violated her, and disgraced her. But his soul was attached to Dinah the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl, and spoke to the girl's heart. So Shechem spoke to Hamor his father, saying, "Get me this girl for a wife." Jacob, however, heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were at the fold in the fields. So Jacob kept silence until their return. Then Hamor the father of Shechem came to Jacob to speak with him. But the sons of Jacob returned from the field upon hearing it, and the men were grieved and very angry at it, for he had done an outrage to Israel in violating the daughter of Jacob, which ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke to them, saying, "My son Shechem is attached by his soul to your daughter.
Therefore give her to him for a wife, and you can give your girls to us, and we can give ours to you to take for yourselves, and you can dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Reside and travel about and possess it." Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you ask of me I will give it. Heap upon me a great dowry in settlement, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the girl for a wife." Then the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father craftily, "Because," they said, "he has corrupted our sister Dinah." So they replied, "We are unable to do such a thing as to give our sister to an uncircumcised man, for that would be a reproach to us. Yet, if you will agree with us that, like us, every male of you should be circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will reside with you and be one people. But if you will not listen to us, then we will take our sister and depart." And the idea was good in the eyes of Shechem the son of Hamor. So the youth did not delay to do the thing. For he had an affection for the daughter of Jacob, and he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and Shechem his son went to the gate of their village, and addressed the men of their town, saying, "These men are peaceable with us, and they travel in it, and the country lies open to their hands before them. We would wish to take their daughters to us for wives, and give our daughters to them. However, the men will only unite with us in this way, to reside with us and to be one people, by our circumcising every male of us, as they are circumcised. Their herds and possessions and all they have, will they not be ours if we agree with them and they reside with us?" All who sat in the gate of the village listened therefore to Hamor and Shechem his son, and they circumcised every male who came to the gate of the town. But on the third day, when they were in pain, Simeon and Levi, the two sons of Jacob, brothers of Dinah, each took his sword and went into the village quietly, and slew every male. They also slew Hamor and his son Shechem with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from the house of Shechem, and went away. Then the sons of Jacob came on the booty, and plundered the town, which had defiled their sister. They took the sheep, the cattle, and the asses, and the wealth in the village, and the wealth in the field, and captured their youths and little children, and wives, and plundered all the furniture in the houses. But Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You are a sorrow to me. You have made me hateful to the inhabitants of the land, to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I, being few in number, they will outnumber me and assail and destroy me and my house." They, however, answered, "Ought they to use our sister as a harlot?" Chapter 35. God afterwards said to Jacob, "Arise, go to Bethel and reside, and make an altar there to the God who appeared to you in your flight from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his family and all who were with him, "Throw away the strange gods which are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothing, and let us be rising. And we will go to Bethel, and I will there build an altar to the God who pitied me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the journey that I went." They therefore gave to Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hands, and the earrings that were in their ears. And Jacob buried them under the oak which was near Shechem. Then they marched, and a terror from God was upon their neighbors, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz in the land of Canaan, it is Bethel, and his people with him. He also built an altar there, and called the house of God Bethel, for there God appeared to him in his flight from the presence of his brother. But Deborah, the nurse of Rebekah, died, and he buried her between Bethel and Allon, and called the name of the place the Oak of Weeping. God also appeared another time to Jacob on his return from Padan Aram, and spoke with him, when God said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, for Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, "I am the Almighty God. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and an assembly of nations shall come from you, and kings shall proceed from your loins. And the land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and the same land I will give to you and your race after you."
Then the divine messenger went up from him from the place where he spoke with him. So Jacob erected a pillar at the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and poured a libation upon it, and poured oil upon it. Jacob also called the name of that place where God spoke with him, God's house. He afterwards marched from there, and had gone some distance into the country towards Ephrathah, when Rachel was taken in labor, and the child went hard with her. But when she was delivered with hard labor, the midwives said to her, Be not downhearted, for this child is a son. But she, breathing out her life, for she was dying, named him Son of my anguish, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died, and they buried her at Ephrathah, which is near Bethlehem, and Jacob erected a pillar over her tomb. Then Israel marched from there, and pitched his tent at the encampment of Migdal-Adar. And it was whilst Israel resided in that country, that Reuben went and committed adultery with Bilhah, his father's second wife, and Israel heard of it. These are the 12 sons of Jacob. The firstborn by Leah to Jacob, Reuben, then Simeon, then Levi, then Judah, and Issachar, then Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. And the sons of Bilhah, the servant of Rachel, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, the servant of Leah, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, who were born to him in Padan Aram. Jacob afterwards went to his father Isaac at Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, where Abraham and Isaac dwelt. And the days of Isaac were 180 years. Then Isaac expired, and died, and was added to his people, old and satisfied with years. And Esau and Jacob his sons buried him. The end of chapters 29 through 35 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Genesis, chapters 36 through 42. Chapter 36. Now these are the descendants of Esau, who is Edom. Esau took wives from the women of Canaan, Adah the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Alibama the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and Bashmath the daughter of Ishmael, the sister of Benaiah. And Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz, and Bashmath bore Reuel, and Alibama bore Jaish and Jamal and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which they bore to him in the land of Canaan. Esau afterwards took his wives, and his sons and daughters, and all the persons of his house, and the flocks, and all his cattle, and all property which he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and left the land from the face of his brother Jacob. For their possessions were too great to remain together, for the land was not able to lodge the both of them because of their herds. Esau is Edom. Esau was the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. These are the names of the sons of Edom: Eliphaz the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel the son of Bashmath, wife of Esau. And these are the sons of Eliphaz: Omar, Zipho, and Nathan, and Kenaz. And Timnah was secondary wife to Eliphaz the son of Esau, and she bore to Eliphaz Amalek. These are the sons of Adah, the wife of Esau. And these are the sons of Reuel: Nahath, and Zerath, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the sons of Bashmath, wife of Esau. And these are the sons of Alibama, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, wife of Esau, which she bore to Esau: Jaish, and Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs from the sons of Esau, and of the sons of Eliphaz, the eldest of Esau: chief Tamar, chief Omar, chief Zipho, chief Kenaz, chief Korah, chief Nathan, chief Amalek. These were the chieftains of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. They were the sons of Adah. And these were the sons of Reuel the son of Esau: chief Nahath, chief Zerah, chief Shammah, chief Mizah. These were chieftains of Reuel in the land of Edom. They were sons of Bashmath, the wife of Esau. These were sons of Esau, and were chieftains in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Seir, the Horites who inhabited the country: Lotan, and Shubal, and Zileon, and Anah, and Dishon, and Azar, and Dishan. These were chieftains of the Horites, sons of Seir, in the land of Edom. And these were the sons of Lotan, Hori and Himam. And the sister of Lotan was Timnah. And these are the sons of Shobal, Alwan, and Manahath, and Ibal, Shepha, and Anam. And these are the sons of Zebaon, Aiah, and Anah. He is the Anah who discovered mules in the desert while attending the asses of Zebaon, his father. These are the children of Anah, Dishon, and Alibama, daughter of Anah. And these are the sons of Dishon, Hamadan, and Ashban, and Ithran, and Keran. These are the sons of Azan, Bilkan, and Zavan, and Akan. These are the sons of Dishan, Aur, and Aran. These are the chiefs of the Horites: chief Lotan, chief Shubal, chief Zibeon, chief Anah, chief Dishon, chief Azer, chief Dishan. These were chiefs of the Horites, as chieftains in the land of Seir. And these are the names of the chieftains of Esau by their families, with their tribal names: chief Timnah, chief Alva, chief Ethaph, chief Alibama, chief Allah, chief Pinan, chief Kana, chief Teman, chief Mibzar, chief Magdiel, chief Iram. These were chieftains of Edom, with the names of the districts they possessed. Esau himself was the father of the people of Edom.
Chapter 37. Jacob continued to reside in the land of his father's foreignhood, in the land of Canaan. These are the progeny of Jacob. Joseph, a lad of 17 years, was attending to the sheep with his brothers, the young men who were sons of Bilhah and sons of Zilpah, two of his father's wives. And Joseph reported their bad conduct to their father. Israel also loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. So he made him a robe with long sleeves. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him, and would not let him be in peace. Joseph, however, dreamed a dream, and told it to his brothers, and they hated him the more for it. For he said, "Listen now to the dream that I dreamed. We were binding sheaves in the middle of a field, when my sheaf arose and stood up, and your sheaves turned and bowed to my sheaf." But they replied to their brother, "Reigning would you reign, and ruling would you rule over us?" So they hated him the more, because of his dream and his talk. Then he dreamed another dream, and related it to his brothers, and said, "I have dreamed another dream, when the sun and the moon and 11 stars came and did homage to me." He told it to his father and to his brothers, and his father reproved him, and said, "What is this dream which you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers come and bow down to the ground to you?" So his brothers envied him, but his father remembered the event. His brothers afterwards went to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the sheep in Shechem? Go, I will send you to them." And he replied, "I am ready." Then he continued, "Go then and see how your brothers are, and how the sheep are, and bring me word." They had gone, however, from the vale of Hebron, and removed to Shechem. And a man met him while searching the field, and asked him, "What are you seeking?" When he answered, "I am seeking my brothers. Tell me where I can find them." So the man responded, "They have marched from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to the 2 wells.'" Joseph consequently went after his brothers, and found them at the 2 wells. When they saw him in the distance, and before he approached them, they determined to murder him. And each said to his brother, "Here is my lord the dreamer, there he comes. So now let us go and murder him, and fling him into one of these wells, and we will say a wild beast caught him. Then we shall see what will come of his dreams." But Reuben heard it, and wished to deliver him from their hand. So he said, "Let us not destroy his life." Reuben also said to them, "Let us not shed his blood. Let us fling him into this dry well." For he was desirous that they should not stab him, so that he might rescue him from their hands, to return him to his father. Therefore when Joseph was come to his brothers, they stripped the robe from Joseph, the long-sleeved robe which was on him, and took him and flung him into the empty well, with no water in it. Then they turned to eat bread. But looking up, they saw at a distance Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels loaded with spices, and nuts, and balm, who were going down to Mitzrayim. Then Judah said to his brothers,
What profit is it to us to murder our brother and dabble ourselves in his blood? Come on, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites, and that guilt will not be upon us, for he is our brother and our own flesh." So they listened to their brother. Meantime those Midianite merchants came on and approached. So they pulled up Joseph from out of the well, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels. Thus Joseph was taken down to Mizraim. Therefore when Reuben returned to the well, he did not find Joseph in the well, so he tore his garments. When he went back to his brothers, he said, "The lad is not, and mourning I shall grieve and die of grief." They, however, took and slaughtered a goat kid and dabbled his robe in its blood, and sent the long-sleeved robe to their father with this message: "About this robe which we send you, send back and say if it is the robe of your son or no." And he replied, "It is the robe of my son. Some wild beast has torn and eaten my son." Jacob consequently tore his garments and put on sackcloth for his death, and mourned for his son many days. Then all his sons and all his daughters arose to console him, but he refused their consolations, and said, "I know that I shall go mourning for my son to the grave." So he wept for his son. But the Midianites sold him in Mizraim to Potiphar, the general of Pharaoh, commander of his guards.
Chapter 38. About this same time Judah went and separated from his brothers, and joined with an Adulamite, whose name was Hira. Whilst there he saw the daughter of a Canaanite, whose name was Bathshua, and he took her and married her, and she conceived and bore a son, and called his name Ur. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and called his name Onan. She afterwards increased and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. Then she ceased to be childbearing. When Judah took a wife for his eldest son Ur, her name was Tamar. But Ur, Judah's eldest son, was wicked in the presence of the ever-living, so the Lord caused him to die. Judah consequently said to Onan, "Marry the wife of your brother, and raise up an heir for your brother." But Onan knew that the heir would not be his own. Therefore when he approached his brother's wife, he ejected on the ground, instead of giving seed to his brother. What he did was, however, wicked in the eyes of the ever-living, and therefore he caused him to die. Then Judah said to Tamar, "Return as a widow to your father's house, until Shelah my son grows up." For he reflected, "Perhaps she may also kill him like his brothers." Therefore Tamar went and returned to her father's house. But time went on, and Bathshua the wife of Judah died, and Judah grieved for her, and went up with Hira the Adulamite his partner, to shear the sheep at Timnath. And it was reported to Tamar that her father-in-law was going up to Timnath to shear his sheep. So she put off her widow's weeds, and concealed herself in her veil, and went down and sat at the opening by the wells which are on the road to Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown up, and he was not given to her as a husband. Judah saw her, and he thought she was a harlot, for she had hidden her face. So he turned from the road to her and said, "Come on, go with me." For he knew not she was his daughter-in-law. Then she asked, "What will you give to me if I go with you?" Then he replied, "I will send you a kid of the goats or sheep." And she replied, "If you will give me a pledge that you will send them?" He replied, "What is the pledge that I shall give you?" And she answered, "Your ring and the stick you have in your hand." So he gave her them, and he went with her, and she conceived to him. Then she arose, and went and put the veil from off her, and dressed herself in her widow's weeds. But Judah sent the kid of the goats by the hand of his partner the Adulamite, who was to receive the pledge from the hand of the woman, and he could not find her. He therefore inquired of the men of the place, asking, "Where is the whore of the wells by the road?" But they replied, "There is no whore by there." So he returned to Judah and reported, "I cannot find her." And the men of the place said, "There was not a whore there." Judah therefore said, "You have taken it to her, therefore I cannot be abused by her. For I sent the kid, but you could not find her." But 3 months after it was reported to Judah, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself, and she is also with child from her fornication." And Judah replied, "Bring her here and burn her." They brought her when she produced the ring and walking stick, and said, "By the man that these belong to, I am with child." And she continued, "To whom belongs this ring and its motto, and this walking stick?" Then Judah replied and said, "You are more virtuous than I, for I did not give you Shelah my son." He therefore proceeded no further to examine her. When therefore the time for her delivery came, there were twins in her belly, and it happened in her childing one put out his hand. So the midwife took it, and tied a scarlet thread upon its hand, remarking, "This came the first." But it occurred that he drew back the hand, and then his brother was produced. When she said, "What? Have you broken? The breach be upon yourself." Therefore she called his name Pharez, and afterwards his brother was born, upon whose hand was the scarlet thread. So she called his name Zara. Chapter 39. Thus Joseph had been taken down to Mitzer and sold to Potiphar, Pharaoh's general, commander of the guards, a Mitzrayite, from the hands of the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. But the ever-living was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man, and was steward to his master, the Mitzrayite. For his master saw that the ever-living was with him, and that all he did the Lord prospered it in his hand. Joseph therefore found favor in his eyes, for he was honest towards him. Consequently he appointed him chief of his house, and entrusted all his possessions to his control, with the result that from when he was appointed over the house, and over all that belonged to him, the ever-living blessed the house of the Mitzrayite under the administration of Joseph, and he was blessed by the ever-living in all his possessions, in the house and in the field, so that all he had increased under the direction of Joseph. Consequently he made no enquiry about what he had, except for the bread which he ate. Joseph was also handsome in form, and handsome in face. It happened, however, after these events, that the wife of his master lifted up her eyes to Joseph, and said, "Lie with me." But he refused, and said to his master's wife, "My master knows not what is in his house, and all that he possesses he has placed in my control. There is not a greater than I in this house, and he has withheld nothing from me except yourself, because you are his wife. Therefore I will not commit that great sin and outrage against God." However, she solicited Joseph day after day, but he would not listen to her, to lie down beside her, or be with her. But it happened that one day, when he came to her apartment with a message for her, and there were none of the attendants of the house there in the apartment, that she seized him by his wrapper, saying, "Lie with me." But he let his wrapper slip off in her hand, and fled away naked. So when she saw that he had left his wrapper in her hand, and had fled naked, she cried out to the attendants of her house, and said to them, "Look, he has brought this foreign fellow to us to insult us. He came to me to violate me, but I shrieked out, and when he heard that I raised my voice and shrieked, then he left his wrapper beside me and fled naked." She also laid by the wrapper with her till her lord came home, when she spoke to him about all this matter, saying, "There came to me the Hebrew slave whom you brought to us to insult me, but when I raised my voice to cry out, he abandoned his wrapper near me and fled away naked." And when his master heard the tale of his wife, which she told him, asserting, "Your servant acted towards me according to my statements," he was fired with anger. Therefore Joseph's master took and put him into the tower house, the place where the prisoners of the king were imprisoned, and he was confined in the tower house. But the ever-living was with Joseph, and gave him mercy, and gave him favor in the eyes of the commander of the tower house, so that the commander of the tower house placed in Joseph's hands the whole of the prisoners who were in the tower house, and all that was done there he directed it. The commander of the tower did not superintend anything, the whole was in his hands, because the ever-living was with him, and what he did, the Lord prospered it. Chapter 40. But it occurred after these events, that the butler of the king of the Mitzrayim offended, and the king of the Mitzrayim his master was angry. And Pharaoh was enraged with two of his officers, with the chief of the butlers, and with the chief of the cooks, and he ordered them to be confined in the house of the commander of the guards, in the tower house, the place where Joseph was also imprisoned. The commander of the guards consequently remitted them to Joseph, and he kept them, and they were many days under restraint. But they dreamed, both of them a dream, each dream in the same night. Each dream had a separate appearance, to the butler and to the cook whom the king of the Mitzrayim had imprisoned in the tower house. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw their pining gloom. So he asked the officers of Pharaoh who were in his custody in the house of his master, "Why are your faces sad and sorrowful today?" And they replied, "We have dreamed dreams, and we have not an interpreter." But Joseph answered, "Is not God the interpreter of dreams? Tell to me now." The chief butler therefore told his dream to Joseph, and said to them, "In my dream I saw a vine before me, and on the vine 3 branches, and the berries grew on them, and the clusters of grapes were ripe, and Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. So I took the grapes and crushed them into the cup of Pharaoh, and put the cup into the hand of Pharaoh." Joseph then said to him, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. After 3 days hence Pharaoh will raise your head and restore you to your station, and you will give Pharaoh's cup to his hand, as was appointed formerly, when you were his butler. Then remember me, because I was kind to you. Do me therefore a kindness, and remind Pharaoh of me, and cause him to bring me out of this house. For by treachery I was dragged from the country of the Hebrews, and also here I have done no crime that should put me in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he also said to Joseph, "I have dreamed as well. And there were 3 baskets filled on my head, and in the highest basket of all, victuals for Pharaoh, ready baked, but the birds ate them from the basket, and from my head." Then Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. 3 days from hence Pharaoh will take your head from off you, and will hang you on a gallows, and the birds shall eat your flesh from off you." It happened that 3 days after was Pharaoh's birthday, and he made a feast for all his officers, and raised the head of the chief of the butlers, and the head of the chief of the bakers among his officers, and restored the chief of the butlers to his butlership, and he gave the cup to the hand of Pharaoh. But he hung the chief of the bakers, as Joseph had interpreted the dream. The chief of the butlers, however, did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Chapter 41. Some time after, it occurred that Pharaoh dreamed, and seemed standing by the river, and saw 7 cows come up from the river, beautiful to see, and full-fleshed, and they fed upon the rushes. Then he saw 7 other cows come up after them from the river, poor to look upon, and lean in flesh. And they approached the cows on the bank of the river, and the cows that were poor to look upon and lean in flesh ate up the 7 beautiful-looking and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. He slept again and dreamed, and saw 7 ears of corn spring up from one stalk, very beautiful and good. He saw also 7 ears of corn spring up after them, withered and blighted by the east wind. And the 7 withered ears of corn swallowed the 7 beautiful and good ears. Then Pharaoh awoke, and it was a dream. When morning came, his spirit was oppressed. So he sent and summoned all the writers of Mitzrayim, and all her scientists. And Pharaoh related his dreams to them. But there was not an interpreter among them for Pharaoh. Then the chief of the butlers spoke to Pharaoh, saying, "I remember my offense of the day when Pharaoh was angry with his servant, and put me into custody in the house of the general of the guard. And the chief of the bakers was with me, and we dreamed a dream in the same night, I and he, each according to the form of the dream we had dreamed. But there was with us a Hebrew youth, a slave of the general of the guard, and we related them to him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. He interpreted to each his own dream, and it happened to us exactly as he interpreted to us our dream." Pharaoh therefore sent and summoned Joseph, and they took him from the dungeon, and shaved him, and changed his clothes, and brought him to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh told Joseph the dream he had dreamed, and that none could interpret it to him. "But I have heard a report about you, that you heard a dream and interpreted it." Joseph accordingly answered to Pharaoh, saying, "May God return an answer of peace to Pharaoh." So Pharaoh related his dream to Joseph. "I stood by the bank of the river, and saw come up from the river 7 cows, full-fleshed and beautiful to see, and they pastured on the rushes.
Then I saw 7 other cows come up after them, miserable and very bad to look at, and lean in flesh. I never saw such wretched things in all the land of the Mitzrayim. They were so bad. But the lean and wretched cows ate up the 7 former beautiful cows, and they came and approached me, and yet I noticed as they came and drew near, and could observe they were poor as before. Then I awoke. Again I was in a dream, and saw 7 ears of corn spring from one stalk, each full and good. Then I saw 7 ears, blasted, poor, and withered by the east wind, follow them. And the poor ears swallowed the 7 good ears, and I told it to the writers, and they cannot inform me about it. Then Joseph replied to Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is all one. What God has determined to do, he has related to Pharaoh. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. These dreams are all one. And the 7 lean and poor cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 poor ears of corn blasted by the east wind, they are 7 years of famine. This event which I have stated to Pharaoh, God has made known to Pharaoh. The 7 years before us will be great years in all the land of the Mitzrayim, but they will be followed by 7 years of famine afterwards, and those 7 shall be forgotten in the land of the Mitzrayim, for the famine shall desolate the land. For those 7 shall not be recognized in the land before the presence of the famine that will follow them, for it will be very heavy. As for the double dream granted to Pharaoh, that confirms the event from God, and God will hasten to effect it. Therefore let Pharaoh seek out a man firm and skillful, and set him over the Mitzrites, and let Pharaoh act and appoint officers over the land, and take a 5th part produced by the land of the Mitzrites, in the first 7 years of the 7s, and store up all that food in the 7 good years that are coming, and store up corn under the hand of Pharaoh for food in cities and fortresses, so that there may be food to support the land in the 7 years of famine, which will be in the land of the Mitzrites, so that the country may not be cut off by the famine. And this advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his ministers. Therefore Pharaoh commanded his ministers to select some man with the Spirit of God in him. Then afterwards Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have perceived that God is with you in all this, and there is certainly no intelligence like yours. Therefore you shall be over my house, and by your mouth all my affairs shall be regulated. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, See, I appoint you over all the land of the Mitzrites. Then Pharaoh took his ring from his hand, and put it upon the hand of Joseph, and clothed him in a white robe, and put a golden chain on his neck, and mounted him in a hooded chariot of his own. And they proclaimed before him the appointment given to him over all the land of the Mitzrites. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your order no man shall move his hand or foot in all the land of the Mitzrites. Pharaoh consequently called the office of Joseph the high treasurership, and gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, for a wife. Joseph at once made a survey of the whole land of the Mitzrites. Joseph was 30 years old on his appearance before Pharaoh, king of the Mitzrites, and Joseph went from the presence of Pharaoh and organized all the land of Mitzr. The earth also produced big loads in the 7 years of the 7s, and he collected much provision in the 7 years, in the land of Mitzr, and stored up the provision. For every town he stored up provision from the fields around it. Joseph consequently stored corn like the sand of the sea for quantity. The amount was so great that they ceased to measure it, because it was immeasurable. Joseph also had 2 sons born to him before the years of the famine came. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bore them, and Joseph called the name of the eldest Manasseh. For God has made me forget all my troubles and all my father's house. But he called the name of the other Ephraim. For God has enriched me in the land of my wrongs. Then the 7 years of the 7s, which were to be in the land of the Mitzrayim, came to an end, and at their end the 7 years of famine began, according to the declaration of Joseph. And the famine was upon all the lands, but in the land of the Mitzrayim there was bread. At last the whole country of the Mitzrites hungered, and the people called upon Pharaoh for bread. But Pharaoh replied to all the Mitzrites, Go to Joseph, who will tell you what to do.
And as the famine was over the whole surface of the country, Joseph opened the stores which he had by him, and distributed to the Mizrahites. Although the famine raged in the land of the Mizraim, yet all the countries came to the Mizraim to buy corn from Joseph, for the famine raged over all the countries round. Chapter 42. Jacob also learnt there was corn in Mizraim. So Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at each other?" He also said, "I have heard that there is corn in Mizraim. Descend to there and buy for us from it, that we may live and not die." Therefore 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy corn from the Mizraim. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, the other brother of Joseph, with his other brothers, for he said, "I fear an injury might happen to him." Thus the sons of Israel went down to buy corn, together with other travelers, for there was a famine in the land of Canaan. Joseph was then protector over all the country, to distribute to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed to him, face to the ground. When Joseph saw them, he scrutinized and recognized them, but spoke to them harshly and asked, "From what country do you come?" They replied, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. But Joseph remembered the dream which he dreamed to himself, and said to them, "You are spies, come to survey the nakedness of the land." But they replied to him, "No, my lord, but your slaves have come to buy food, and all of us are sons of one man. We are honest men, we are not spies." However he replied, "No, but you are come to see the nakedness of the country." They then answered, "Your slaves were 12 brothers. We are the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is at home today, and one is not." But Joseph returned, "That is just what I said to you, when I said you are spies. By this I will prove you. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from here until you have brought your youngest brother here. Send one of yourselves to take your brother and return. Then you will prove your words true about him, and if not, by the life of Pharaoh you are spies." And he further ordered them to be imprisoned 3 days. But after the 3rd day Joseph said to them, "Do this and live, for I fear God. I will select one of you brothers, whom I will put into confinement instead of you, and you others take corn for your starving families. But you must bring your younger brother to me and verify your statement, and live and not die." And they did so. But each said to his brother, "We suffer for our sins against our brother, because we saw the anguish of his soul, imploring us to have pity on him, and we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us." Then Reuben answered them and said, "Did I not speak to you and say, 'Let us not sin against the lad,' and you would not listen to me? And now his blood is sought for." And they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he used an interpreter with them. But he withdrew from them and wept. Then he returned to them and spoke, and selected Simeon from them, and fettered him before their eyes. Joseph afterwards commanded, and their wagons were loaded with corn. But he caused their money to be returned into the load of each. Then he gave them leave to go, and showed politeness to them. They also loaded corn upon their asses, and set out. But one of them opened a sack of his to give fodder to his ass in the inn, and saw his money, which was placed openly in its mouth. Then he said to his brothers, "He has caused my money to be returned, and here it is in my bag." And their hearts stopped, and they trembled each at his brother, exclaiming, "What is this that God has done to us?" They went, however, to Jacob in the land of Canaan, and reported to him all these proceedings, saying, "The man who is master of the country spoke to us harshly, and took us for spies upon the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest, and are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is not, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan.' But the man who is master of the country said, 'By this I will discover if you are honest. I will select one of your brothers to remain with me, but take for your starving families and go. But you shall bring me your youngest brother, that I may be convinced you are not spies, when I will return the brother I have selected from you, and you may trade in the country.' When, however, they were emptying their loads, then each found his money in his cargo, and they were in fear at the finding of the money. Both they and their father were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, 'I am bereaved. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and you would take from me all there are.' Then Reuben replied to his father, saying,
Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring them back to you. I now place them in your hands as a pledge that I will return them to you. But he answered, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone remains, and an accident might happen to him in the journey that you are going, and you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave.
The end of chapters 36 through 42 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Genesis, chapters 43 through 50. Chapter 43. But the famine oppressed the country, and it arrived that when all the food they had bought from the Mitzrayim ended, that their father said to them, Return and buy us a little food. When Judah replied to him, saying, The man swore to us, asseverating, You shall never see my face unless your brother is with you. If you are wise enough to send our brother with us, we will return and buy food for you to eat. But if you will not send, we will not go down, for the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Israel, however, answered, Why did you wrong me by telling the man that there was another brother to you? And they responded, The man demanded of us about our birthplace, asking, Have you a father living? Have you a brother? And we told him straightforwardly about those things. How could we know he would say, Bring your brother down with you? Then Judah exclaimed to Israel, Send the lad with me, and I will come up and return him alive. And if not, kill me, myself, as well as my children. I pledge myself for him. From my hand seek him if I do not bring him back to you. Then banish me from your face, for I shall have sinned against you all my days. If you had not hesitated, we should already have returned before now. Therefore Israel their father said to him, If it must be, do this. Take some of the productions of this country in your wagons, and go down to the man with a present, some balsam and honey, perfumes and myrrh, nuts and almonds. Also take double money in your hands, and the money that was returned in the mouth of your bags return with your own hands to him again. Take your brother also, and arise, go back to the man. And may the Almighty God give you mercy before the man, and send your brother back with Benjamin. For if I am to be bereaved, I shall be bereaved. Consequently the men took the present, and took double money in their hands, and Benjamin, and arose and went to Mitzrayim, and appeared before Joseph. And Joseph saw Benjamin with them, and said to the chief of his house, Invite those men to my house, and prepare a dinner, for those men shall eat with me at noon. The man therefore did as Joseph ordered, and he brought the men to Joseph's house. But the men were afraid at being brought to Joseph's house, and said, It is on account of the money which was returned to our bags last time that we are brought, to have an excuse against us, and to fall upon us, and to take us for his slaves with our asses. Therefore they approached the steward of Joseph's house, and spoke with him in the veranda of the house, and said, By the ever-living, we came down for the purpose of buying food, but when we returned to the inn and opened our bags, there was our money in the mouth of our bags in full amount, but we have returned with it in our hands. We have also brought other money with us to buy food. We knew not that our money was there in our loads. But he answered, Be quiet, and fear nothing. Your God and the God of your father has given you that money secretly into your loads. Come with me. Then he brought Simeon to them. The man, the steward of Joseph's house, also went out and ordered water, and they washed their feet. Then he ordered fodder for their asses. They then prepared the present against Joseph's arrival at noon, for they heard they were to dine with him. When Joseph came to the apartment, they presented him the present which they had brought from home, and bowed to the ground before him. Then he asked them about their health, and said, Is your father well, the old man you told me of? Is he alive yet? And they replied, Your slaves are well, and our father is yet alive, and bent and bowed. But he raised his eyes and saw Benjamin his brother, the son of his mother, and asked, Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? Then he added, God show you mercy, my son. Then Joseph hastened, For his affection burned for his brother, and he sought to weep. So he went into his chamber and wept there. But afterwards he washed his face and came again, and restrained himself, and ordered dinner to be served. They therefore served it for him by himself, and to them apart by themselves. For the Mitzrites dined by themselves, for the Mitzrites are not allowed to eat food with foreigners, for that is disgusting to the Mitzrites. But they placed in his presence the eldest according to his age, and youngest according to his youth, and arranged the men each by his relative. And they took dishes from before him to offer to them. But they offered to Benjamin more dishes than to any of the rest, presenting 5, which they presented and left with him. Chapter 44. Afterwards he commanded his steward, saying, "Fill the loads of these men with food as much as they are able to carry, and put the money of each on the top of the carts, and my cup, the cup of silver, place at the top of the load of the youngest with the money for his corn." So they did as Joseph ordered. At morning light the men went off with their asses. When they had gone not far from the city, Joseph said to his steward, "Mount and follow those men. Secure them, and say to them, 'Why have you returned evil for good? Where is that my lord drinks from? He is very sharp-sighted. He saw what you were doing.'" So he pursued and said this to them. But they replied, "Why has my lord spoken these words, accusing your servants of having done such a thing? You know we returned to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the top of our loads. We have not stolen silver or gold from the house of your lord. If it is found with any of your servants, kill him, and we also will be slaves to my lord." And he replied, "It shall be as you say. Therefore with whoever of you it is, he shall be my slave, and you shall be innocent." Then they hastened, and each one unloaded his load, and he searched beginning at the eldest to the youngest, and found the cup in Benjamin's load. Then they tore their garments, and mounted each man his ass, and returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and were again brought in, they fell on their faces to the ground, while Joseph said to them, "How has this occurred that you have committed? Did you not know that I observe what happens around me?" Then Judah replied, "What can I say to my lord? What assert, or how vindicate myself? God has found out the sin of your slaves in their hands. Alas, we are slaves to my lord, both we and the one in whose hand the cup was found." But he answered and said, "Far be it from me to act thus. The one in whose possession the cup was found, he shall be a slave to me, but you can go in peace to your father." Then Judah approached him and said, "To me, my lord, grant now for your slave to speak to the ears of my lord, and let not your anger burn with your slave, for you are to me like Pharaoh." My lord asked of his slaves, saying, "Have you a father or brother living?" And we replied to my lord, "A father lives with us, an old man, and a lad of his old age, the youngest, but his brother is dead. And beside him there is none from his mother, so his father loves him. Then you said to your slaves, 'Bring him to me, that I may set my eyes on him.' But we replied to my lord, 'The youth is not able to leave his father, for if he leaves his father, then he will die.' You, however, said to your slaves, 'If you do not bring down your youngest brother with you, you shall not again see my face.' And when we went up to your slave my father, he was informed of the demand of my lord, so that when our father said, 'Return and buy us a little food,' we replied, 'We cannot go down unless our youngest brother is with us. Even should we descend, we cannot see the face of the man unless our youngest brother is with us.' Then your slave my father said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 lads, and one went from me, and I said, Alas, he has been torn to pieces, and I shall see him no more. And if you take this one from my face, and an accident should happen to him, you will bring my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So now if I should go to your slave my father, and the youth is not with us, whose life is bound to his life, it will be then when he sees that the youth is not with us, he will die, and your slave will cause the gray hairs of your slave our father to go down in agony to the grave. Besides, your slave pledged himself for the youth to my father, saying, If we do not bring him back to you, then let me be banished from my father all my days. So now I pray, let your slave remain instead of the youth, a slave to my lord, and let the youth return with his brothers. For if I go up to my father, and the youth is not with me, then I shall see the misery that will come upon my father." Chapter 45. Then Joseph was not able to restrain himself before all the officers around him, and cried, "Every man go out from me!" So not a man remained with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Then Joseph discovered his language to his brothers, and the Mitzrites heard, and it was reported to the house of Pharaoh, and Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father yet live?" But his brothers were not able to answer him, for they were terrified at the sight of him. Joseph therefore said to his brothers, "Come near to me." So they approached, when he said, "I really am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to go to Mitzr, and I know that with fury and rage in your eyes you sold me. However, God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has encircled the land, and for 5 years more there will not be plowing or harvest. Therefore God has sent me before you to preserve to you a posterity in the earth, and a secure refuge for your lives. Consequently, it was not you who sent me, but God who appointed me as a father to Pharaoh, and an administrator of all his house, and a governor for all the land of the Mitzrayim. Therefore arise and go up to my father and say to him, Your son Joseph says thus, God has appointed me as administrator of all the Mitzrites. So come down to me, do not delay. You shall reside in the land of Goshen and be near to me, you, your children, and your children's children, with your sheep and your oxen and all that you have, and I will provide for you there. For there are 5 years of famine yet. Therefore come down, yourself and your family and all that you have, so that my eyes may see you and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, and that my mouth may also speak with you. You must also inform my father of all my power among the Mitzrayim, and all that you have seen, and cause your father to mount and come down to here." Then he fell upon the necks of his brothers and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. He also kissed all his brothers and wept over them, and afterwards his brothers conversed with him. And a report was communicated to the palace of Pharaoh, saying, "Joseph's brothers have come." And it was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and of his ministers. Pharaoh therefore said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers thus, Load up all of you from this city and go to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your families and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of the Mitzrayim, and you shall be fed on the fat of the land. You yourself also command this to be done. Take from the land of Mitzr wagons for your little children and wives and your father, and bring them. Care nothing also for the abandonment of your goods, for the best of the land in Mitzr shall be yours." The sons of Israel accordingly did so, and Joseph gave them wagons from Pharaoh's arsenal, and provided provisions for the journey. He also gave all of them a suit of clothes. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pounds and 5 suits of clothes. To his father he sent in addition 10 he-riding asses, the best in Mitzr, and 10 she-riding asses besides, with bread and meat for his father on the way. Thus he sent off his brothers, and said to them, "Do not quarrel on the road." They accordingly went from the Mitzrayim, and ascended to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father, and reported to him, saying, "Joseph is yet alive, and he is also governor of all the land of the Mitzrayim." Then his heart failed, for he could not believe them. Then they related all that Joseph had said to them. But when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry himself, then the spirit of Jacob their father revived, and Israel said, "It is enough. My son Joseph does live. I will go and see him before I die." Chapter 46. Israel consequently marched, and all that were with him, and went to the well of the oath, and offered offerings to the God of his father Isaac. Then God appeared to Israel in a vision at night, and said, "Jacob, Jacob!" And he replied, "I am here." When he answered, "I am God, the God of your father Isaac. Fear not. Go down to the Mitzrayim, for you shall become a great nation there. I, the mighty, will be with you in Mitzr, and I will support you, and Joseph shall place his hands upon your eyes." Jacob afterwards arose from the well of the oath, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and their children and wives in the wagons, which Pharaoh had sent to carry them in. They also took their herds, and the property they had purchased in the land of Canaan, and went to the Mitzrayim. Jacob and all his race with him, his sons and sons of his sons with him,
His daughters and his daughters' sons, and all his race went with him to the Mitzrayim. Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who went to the Mitzrayim: Jacob, and the eldest son of Jacob, Reuben, and the sons of Reuben, Hanok, and Phelwah, and Hetzon, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, and Jamin, and Ehad, and Jachin, and Zochar, and Shaul ben Canaanith. And the sons of Levi, Gershan, Kohath, and Merari. And the sons of Judah, Ar, and Onan, and Shelach, and Pharez, and Hetzion, and Hamal. And the sons of Issachar, Thola, and Phurah, and Job, and Shimron. And the sons of Zebulun, Sered, and Alon, and Jokhlal. These were children from Leah, which she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, beside Dinah his daughter. And the persons of her sons and daughters were 33. And the sons of Gad, Ziphion, and Hanai, Shenai, and Atzban, Arai, and Arodai, and Echalai. And the sons of Asher were Jamnah, and Ishna, and Ishur, and Beriah, and Sirach his twin brother. And the sons of Beriah, Heber, and Malchiel. These were the children of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah his daughter, and who bore them to Jacob, 26 persons. Sons of Rachel, wife of Jacob, were Joseph and Benjamin. But there were born to Joseph in the land of the Mitzrayim, whom Asenath the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore, Manasseh and Ephraim. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela, and Becher, and Ashbol, Gera, and Naaman, twins, and Rash with the twin Muphai, and twin Kuphai, and Arad. These were the sons of Rachel, which she bore to Jacob, 14 persons in all. And the son of Gad was Cushan. And the sons of Naphtali, Jachzeel, and Gunai, and Jetzer, and Shilam. These were the children of Bela, whom Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, and she bore these to Jacob, in all 7 persons. And the souls who went with Jacob to Mizar, who sprung from his loins, being men only, sons of Jacob, all the persons were 70. But the sons of Joseph, who were born to him in Mizar, were 2 persons, men. So all the persons of the family of Jacob who came down to Mizar were 70. But he sent Judah before himself to invite Joseph to meet him in Goshen, when he arrived in the land of Goshen. Joseph accordingly at once mounted his chariot, and went to meet Israel his father in Goshen, whom he looked at, and fell upon his neck, and wept on his neck for a long time. And Israel said to Joseph, "Let me die at once, after I have seen your face. Why should I live longer?" Joseph afterwards said to his brothers and to the family of his father, "I will go and inform Pharaoh, and tell him that my brothers and the family of my father who were in the land of Canaan have come to me, and that the men feed sheep. They have lived with people of the fold, and their sheep and cattle and all that they have brought. But it must be that when Pharaoh calls you and inquires, 'What can you do?' you must say, 'Your slaves have lived as cattlemen from their youth until now, both we and our fathers. Grant us to settle in the land of Goshen, for the Mitzrites hate every shepherd of sheep." Chapter 47. Joseph accordingly went and reported to Pharaoh, and said, "My father and brothers, and their sheep and cattle, and all that they have, are come from the land of Canaan, and are in the land of Goshen." Then he selected 5 from his brothers to take and present to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked his brothers, "What is your business?" When they replied to Pharaoh, "Your slaves are shepherds of sheep, as we are, so were our fathers." They also said to Pharaoh, "We have come to reside in the land, for there is no pasture for your slaves' sheep, because the famine is heavy in the land of Canaan. So allow your slaves to live in the land of Goshen." Pharaoh therefore in reply said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of the Mitzrayim is before you. So fix your father and brothers in the best of it. Let them settle in the land of Goshen, and if you know also a skillful man amongst them, appoint him superintendent of my farms." Joseph afterwards took Jacob his father and presented him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" When Jacob replied to Pharaoh,
The days of the years of my stay have been 130 years. Few and evil have been the years of the days of my life, and they have not reached to the days of the years my fathers lived in the days of their stay."
Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and retired from the presence of Pharaoh. Joseph afterward settled his father and his brothers, and gave them possession in the land of the Mitzrayim, in the best district of the country of Ramses, as he was commanded. Joseph also provided food for his father and brothers, and all their families, according to their children. Bread failed in all the country, for the famine was very severe, and the land of the Mitzrayim and the land of Canaan fainted before the famine. Therefore Joseph gathered up all the money he found in the land of Mizr and in the land of Canaan, and all the Mizrahites came to Joseph for the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money to the treasury of Pharaoh. Thus he collected the money from the land of Mitzrayim and the land of Canaan. Then all the Mizrahites came to Joseph to say, "Provide bread for us, so that we may not die before you, for our money is exhausted." Joseph, however, answered them, "Bring your cattle, and I will give you it for your cattle instead of for money." Consequently they brought their cattle to Joseph, and he gave them bread, for horses and cattle and sheep. For herds of oxen and asses he supplied them with bread, in exchange for all their cattle for that year. But that year ended. So they came to him in the next year, and said to him, "We have kept back nothing from my lord. We have nothing left before my lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we ourselves die before your eyes? Buy to yourself our land for bread, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh." Thus the Mizrahites sold every one his farm, for the famine was cruel upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. But he transferred the people upon it to fresh villages, from the one extreme boundary of Mizr to the other extreme of it, except that he did not buy the lands of the priesthood, for he protected the priesthood by laws from Pharaoh, and they were fed from rations provided for them. Therefore he did not buy their lands. Then Joseph proclaimed to the nation, "You see, I have bought you today and your land for Pharaoh. I will supply seed to you, and you can sow the land. But of its produce you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be for yourselves, to sow the fields and to feed you with those you employ, and as food for your children." They thereupon replied, "Our lives have found favor in the eyes of my lord, and we will be slaves of Pharaoh." So Joseph made it the constitution to this day, that the land of the Mizrahites was Pharaoh's for the 5th tax, except the lands of the priesthood, which were not to become Pharaoh's. Joseph also settled Israel in the land of the Mitzrayim in the district of Goshen, and they possessed there and flourished and increased greatly. Jacob, however, lived 17 years in the land of the Mitzrayim, and all the days of the years of Jacob were 147 years. But the day approached for Israel to die, and he called his son Joseph to him, and said to him,
"If now I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh, and do to me a true kindness, and bury me not among the Mitzrayim, but lay me to sleep with my fathers, and carry me from Mizr, and bury me in their burial place."
And he replied, "I will do as you have said." But he answered,
"Swear to me."
And Israel was reclining on the surface of his bed. Chapter 48. But it was after these events that it was reported to Joseph, "Your father is ill." So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him, and Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel exerted himself and sat up in his bed. And Jacob said to Joseph,
"The Almighty God appeared to me on my departure from the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said to me, 'I will make you flourish, and increase your family, and make you an assembly of nations. And I will give this land to your race after you, as a possession, forever. But now for your 2 sons, who have been born to you in the land of the Mitzrayim before I came to you in Mizr, let then Ephraim and Manasseh be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are mine. But your children whom you have begot after them, they shall be yours. They shall not be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. When I came from Padan, Rachel died from me in the land of Canaan, on the journey, in Kibroth Arts, near the pass of Ephrathah, and I buried her by the road at Ephrathah."
Then Israel looked at the sons of Joseph, and said,
"These are mine."
But Joseph said to his father, "They are the sons which God gave me here." He, however, replied, "I will take them now for myself, and bless them." But the eyes of Israel were heavy from age. He was not able to distinguish, so he drew them to him, and kissed them, and embraced them. Afterwards Israel said to Joseph, "I have seen your face unexpectedly, and now God has shown me also your heirs." Then Joseph brought them for his blessing, and they bowed before his face earthward. Then Joseph took both of them, Ephraim in his right hand for the left hand of Israel, and Manasseh in his left for the right hand of Israel, and approached him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and placed it upon the head of Ephraim, who was youngest, and his left hand upon the head of Manasseh intentionally, although Manasseh was the eldest. Then he blessed Joseph, and said, "The God in the presence of whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who appeared to me from of old until this day, the messenger who redeemed me from all misfortune, bless the lads, and give them my power, the power of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and pour out their increase to the bounds of the earth." Joseph then discovered that his father had placed his right hand on the head of Ephraim, and it was unpleasing in his eyes. So he took hold of his father's hand, to change it from off the head of Ephraim to the head of Manasseh. Joseph also said to his father, "Not thus, my father, for this is the eldest. Place your right hand on his head." But his father refused, saying, "I knew it, my son, I knew it. He also shall be a nation, and he also shall be great. But nevertheless his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his race shall be a multitude of nations. And when blessing in that period, they shall say, 'The blessing of Israel be upon you. May God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh,' and they will place Ephraim above Manasseh." Then Israel said to Joseph, "I shall die, but God will be with you, and will return you to the land of your fathers. Therefore I give to you Shechem alone, above your brothers, which I took to me by my hand, from the Amorites, by my sword and my bow." Chapter 49. Jacob afterwards called his sons, and said, "Assemble, and I will inform you what will befall you in future times. Collect and listen, sons of Jacob. Yes, listen to your father Israel. Reuben, the first of my vigor, you are the crown of my passion, excelling in beauty, excelling in strength. Boiling like water, you lost command, for mounting your father's bed, yes, defiling my honor's abode. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Cruel weapons are hidden with them. To their plottings go not my soul. For honor, join not their clan. For they murdered guiltless men, and joyfully murdered a prince. Curse their crime as great, and their transgression, for it sorely troubled Jacob, and Israel shamed. Judah, you shall direct your brothers. Your hand shall be on the neck of your foes. To you shall the sons of your father bow. A young lion, Judah, for plunder. My son springs from his couch like a lion, and as a lioness, who dare rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, or the giver of law from between his feet, till peace arrive, and the nations obey him, bound to the vine like an ass, and a colt the son of a stepper. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of clusters. His eyes shall be bright as grapes,
and his teeth be white as milk. Let Zebulun dwell on the shore of the sea, on the shore of the ships, and extend his legs to the fishery. A strong ass, Issachar, lies in the stall, and he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant. So he gives his back to the load, and becomes a servant for hire. Dan shall govern his people as a sceptered prince of Israel. Dan is a snake in the path, an adder laid in the road. He will bite the heels of the horses, who will throw their riders backwards. For your victory, trust on the Lord. Gad, a troop, he shall troop, but a troop shall deceive him. For Asher, his food shall be rich, and his are the royal pleasures. Naphtali is a nimble stag, has the gift of eloquent speech. Joseph, a fruitful plant by a well, with branches spread on the wall. But the master of arrows provoked and shot and pierced him. But he turned to his powerful bow, and the hands of his arms were quick, by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, from whom is Israel's guardian stone. May the God of your father guard you, and the Almighty bless you, with blessings from the sky above, with blessings below of dancing water, with the bliss of the breasts and love. May the blessings of your father strengthen with the bliss of the fertile vales. May the wealth of the ancient hills be heaped on the head of Joseph, more nobly crowned than his brothers. Benjamin, a wolf, shall eat plunder at morn, and at night shall divide his spoil.
All the offshoots of Israel were 12. And their father said this to them, and blessed each with his blessing, with blessings adapted to each. Then he addressed them and said, I shall be added to my people. Bury me with my fathers, in the cave which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave which is in the field of Machpelah, which is near Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which field Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite, for a place of burial. Abraham is buried there, and Sarah his wife. Isaac is buried there, and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field was bought, and the cave in it, from the sons of Heth. Jacob thus finished instructing his sons, and stretched out his legs upon the bed, and expired, and was added to his people. Chapter 50. Then Joseph fell upon his father's face, and wept, and kissed him. Joseph afterwards ordered his servants the physicians to embalm his father. The physicians accordingly embalmed Israel. When the 40 days were completed, which the embalming occupies, then the Mitzrites wept for him yet 40 days, and at the conclusion of the 40 days of mourning, Joseph addressed the court of Pharaoh and said, If now I have found favor in your sight, speak, I request, to the ears of Pharaoh, and say, My father made me swear, saying, When I die, bury me in the tomb which I cut out for myself in the land of Canaan. So now I wish to go up and bury my father, and will return. Pharaoh then replied, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. Joseph therefore went up to bury his father, and there went up with him all the ministers of Pharaoh, the nobles of his court, and all the nobles of the land of the Mitzrayim, with all the family of Joseph and his brothers, and the families of his father, and except the sheep and cattle which were left in the land of Goshen. There also accompanied him chariots and horsemen, making a very large army. All these marched to Goren-Hatar, which is over the Jordan, and mourned there with a great and very heavy mourning, and made a lamentation for his father for 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land of Canaan saw the lamentation at Goren-Hatar, they said, This is a great grieving for the Mitzrites. Therefore they called its name Mitzer's Lament. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he commanded them. So they, his sons, carried him to the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, which field Abraham bought to be a burial place, from Ephron the Hittite, opposite Mamre. Then Joseph returned to Mizar, himself and his brothers, and all who had accompanied him to bury his father, after he had buried his father. But when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to one another, "Joseph will hate us, and will return upon us all the wrong which we heaped upon him." They therefore sent to Joseph and said, "Our father commanded us before he died, 'Say to Joseph this, Forgive, I pray, your brother's fault and sin in the wrongs they heaped upon you. Consequently we beg of you to forgive the fault of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph, however, wept at their address to him. Then his brothers went and fell before his face and said, "We are your slaves." But Joseph replied to them, "Fear nothing, for I am subject to God. Although you set upon me for injury, God turned it to good, in order that I might make this nation to give life to many peoples. Go now, do not fear me. I will protect you and your children." Thus he comforted them and spoke to their hearts. This was after Joseph returned to Mitzrayim, he and his father's family. And Joseph lived 120 years. And Joseph saw his great-grandchildren from Ephraim. Sons also of Machir the son of Manasseh were fondled on the knees of Joseph. At last Joseph said to his relatives, "I shall die. However, the ever-living will visit you, and take you up from this country to the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph administered an oath to the sons of Israel to say, "When your God visits you, take up my bones from here." Thus Joseph died, 120 years old, and they embalmed him, and placed him in a coffin in Mitzrayim. The end of chapters 43 through 50, and the end of the book of Genesis from the Bible in Modern English, translated by Farrar Fenton. Recording by Mark Penfold.